What's up, everyone? Welcome to Unfazed Facts, the podcast dedicated to all things Gym Leader Challenge and the Pokemon TCG. I am one of your hosts, Jeff Bache, all about that Bache, and we are joined by Gym Leader Josh. Josh, what's up, my friend?
What is up, guys? It's November 1st. I don't know if you caught Mariah Carey's newest video, but it's time. It is All I Want for Christmas Is You, and when I say you, I mean GLC. But it is the month of Thanksgiving, so remember to stay thankful during this time of year as well. It gets a little hectic as well during this time.
Oh yeah, that's something good to remember, man. Like I'm feeling a little stretched thin. You know, it's just good to take a moment and just think about all things we're thankful for. Man, I am thankful for Gym Leader Challenge, and we were talking about it in our little build up here. I'm thankful for the Gym Leader Challenge community too, man. We got a good community out there. We got some good cards to talk about tonight too. I'm just so excited. And of course, I've got a wonderful co-host, Josh. So excited to have you on for the long run, a permanent host. So again, exciting news if you didn't catch our last episode. Josh is with us all the time, full time. He is an unpaid intern, but for reals.
24/7, 365. I'm there to fetch your coffee, man.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Well, Josh, you know, have I ever asked you, Josh, do you actually have a locals? Do you play locally Gym Leader Challenge, or is all the stuff you do online?
I had 3 weeks there where I had a locals, and then it started off with 8 people, and it got a little bit smaller. But you know how locals are. You have your big days, your small days. The person I was, putting it on can't get past the small days, so we are no longer having it after 3 sessions. But I did win. I think I did win all 3 sessions. So There we go. Undefeated, baby.
Sounds like you drove them all off, man.
I hope not, because I played different decks. I even played grass spread. It's not like the best, but it was fun.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that we have my locals where we're at, and also very fortunate that I'm a person who gets to run them to a certain degree. Yeah. We don't really have a store. Like, we have 2 stores near us, but neither have really showed interest in running Gym Leader Challenge events. So, like, we run one out of a brewery, and then we run the other event, because we do 2 events monthly, every other week. So, one event at a brewery near us, and then another event at a store, just so that we could try to build the player base a bit. So, it's going pretty well. So, I was just curious, Josh, because, I wanted to see if we could get a local rack up, but only 3 from you. That's kind of rough. We're very fortunate. We're on season 2 of ours, so we've been through it for like a year and a half now, more or less.
That's awesome. So is the one at the store an official one where they kind of have it as just kind of like a game night, or?
No, so everything is me. Everything is me, and me, trying to publicize to different people in different game stores and trying to get people. And we have a really strong core group of people. Like, we're probably sitting between about 8 to 10 people that show up each and every time if they can. It's mostly like old Magic players that want to relive the nostalgia of what Pokemon was when they were trying to collect. And then we have a couple of other like Pokemon players. And we actually have people that drive like an hour away to come hang out with us in Florence. So shout out to people in Florence, South Carolina that come and join us to play.
That's awesome.
We had one guy bring 3 people in his car to come play with us. We had like an 8-person event, so majority of them from Florence, and they're great people too. So we just have a really great community here, and no one's really too gung-ho about winning or losing here and there. Like, I got to play Crobat Grass Spread during our last event and had some really, really sweet fun games. Free Water does really well at our events. I think it went 2-1 for second place. And then Fire Mill, like this sweet hybrid Fire Mill deck, also went 2-1. And then I think Psychic Lost Zone List, which only lost was to the Mill deck, which is kind of hilarious because those decks like dig and dig and dig.
Yeah.
Our locals is just great. It's just always like a fun time, and like what decks you're going to see is kind of like crazy. And like, I'm always trying to bring like my new decks there and trying things out with them. So great people. So I love our locals. I wish I've tried so hard to get a store to help us run our events. Like, I have emailed, I have called, I have been like, I have 8 people ready to show up at your store and spend some money. Can we have an event there? And it's just always like, let's talk to this person, or no, we don't have the space. Like, it's so weird how like I'm basically doing like all the legwork, but I can't get anyone to kind of like give our community a home. So like, our badge board is a little like I carry it around with me wherever we go. So like right now it's just sitting in the back of my car with like the 4 different people that have won badges that are locals faces
That
on
is
it.
awesome.
So
That is so cool. That's like what do they call that? Just grassroots community, man. That is so cool. I
we're
love that.
nomadic. We're nomadic. I'm one of those like strong believers that like, you know, before you complain about something, like you should definitely put in the work and do something. So, I mean, one of the reasons why this Gym Leader Challenge stream exists is because I was like, no one's making content for it. Let's do it. And like that's one of the reasons behind it. And then, you know, no one was making events near us, so we did it, and so that's where we're at. So hopefully it grows into something. It blossoms into like, I guess, some official events. I think right now it's probably pretty official the way it is. You know, people will just buy packs, and I'm like, your buy-in is a pack. You know, just put a pack in the middle of the table, and that will be kind of our payout at the end. I'll throw in a couple of different prizes. Cool. I definitely lose money on all of our events, but like, I just want us to play Gym Leader Challenge and have a good community. That's where I'm at with it.
That's awesome. That is the coolest thing I've heard in a while, actually. That's really cool.
It's what you need to do, Josh, right now.
I know. That's what I need to do.
Everyone at Josh's Locals. Josh is running an event. He'll let you know details later.
Yeah, details later to come.
Well, Josh, obviously, we got things to talk about tonight. It's going to be a long one. You guys know the deal. It's set review time. And we got to talk about all these cool cards from Surging Sparks. I thought about maybe in the lead up to this that maybe we would talk about how well some of the Stellar Crown cards would do, but I thought that maybe that's better served next week when we talk about the Fall Brawl, because I think we'll see a lot of the Stellar Crown cards kind of make an appearance in that. So for those of you who don't know, we're filming on Friday, November 1st. November 2nd is the Fall Brawl. It's the big online webcam Cardboard Warriors tournament. Josh, you're playing in it, right?
Yep, I'll be playing in it. I'm pretty excited for it. After we get done here, I got to get everything set up so it's ready to go in the morning so I don't have to worry about it later. Because sometimes that webcam stuff can get a little sketchy, getting everything set up to where it's perfect and you can see everything, because I want my opponent to see me shuffling, see my prizes, see everything without having to question anything. So it's going to be a good time. Got some little Fall Brawl action, and it's going to be great. I love the name Fall Brawl.
Yeah, good name. I can't remember who came up with it. It might have been Weeder who came up with it, but Fall Brawl is a good name. Do you want to share, Josh? Is there any spoilers for what deck list you're playing?
I'm probably going to take Water. My tag team Titans for another round. We'll see how it does.
Okay. Is that a meta call, or is that just like you feel most comfortable with that deck and that's what you think you want to do?
It's both a meta call, because I think that right now Special Wells is maybe on the decline. You know, not a whole lot of people are playing it. I don't think I've seen too many people playing it. So I think it's going to do pretty decent amongst the field. I expect to see, you know, still quite a bit of colorless. I expect to see some just any type of psychic, you know, and colorless you expect to see just Snorlax and psychic. I expect to see just every type of psychic, whether it be Lost Zone, whether it be Tinkaton Glade, whether it be just a regular Dusknoir spread deck like Dusk Buddies or anything like that. And then, you know, I expect to see a little bit of tank and heal actually through metal and some grass. So, you know, having Wailord hitting 240 is going to be tough to tank. So we're going to have a good time with that.
Yeah. I think Wales is a pretty good call. I'm with you. I kind of think that like Psychic is always going to be like ever present. And one of the things that makes me like maybe not want to play Wells is like Mimikyu is so good into Wales, right? Yeah. Especially the way it's constructed right now. We'll probably talk about a card in a bit that maybe helps that matchup a bit. But yeah, Mimikyu, just like 2 energy, kill your 4 energy, stage 1 investment can be tough. So that's always in the back of my mind when I'm thinking about like where Wells sits in the meta. And then of course, you know, you mentioned colorless, dude. I know we weren't going to talk too much about Stellar Crown cards, but Fan Rotom is busted. That card is wild. Why did they print that card? Like, it is so good. It is in a type that, like, maybe needs a couple of adjustments through certain decks to make it good, but that card is just bonkers insane. Like it just needs to find its way to the bench. Artisan, Nest Ball, Quick Ball. You just need to get it onto your bench turn 1, and then you're set up. You just got Bridget off of a Nest Ball. It is busted. Yeah. So I expect Colorless to have a really strong showing, which I think Wales has a really strong showing into Colorless. So I do think in that call, I think it's a really good medical.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of, the Copycat Mimikyu, I was just thinking while you were speaking, I think it's Erica's invitation, but maybe taking in Erica's invitation and just wait till they have that Mimikyu in their hand. They don't want to play it out yet. You just invite them to the active spot, and just give them a little tap.
Are you playing Lost City in your deck?
No, never.
Good man. I was going to say that's obviously a pretty good tech card, but you should not play it. You should play it if you really, really, really want to win. But.
Lost City is one of those cards that I will say I just don't like, just altogether.
That's fine.
The only one.
We're of like mind in that, and I think a lot of viewers are. And if you play Lost City in your deck, that's fine. Don't hop on us and tell us that we're wrong. We know how good of a card and how strong of a card it is.
Yeah, but it's very good.
But yeah, I think that at some point you do realize that like there's a card that's maybe a little bit toxic, or maybe doesn't necessarily have a place in your locals community because you want your people to have fun. And Lost City might be that card. It's good, it's strong, it does what it's supposed to do. It keeps degenerate decks in check. So there's that.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, enough for the Fall Brawl. We'll talk about that next week after all the things are said and done. But we got Surging Sparks to talk about. And I actually think that this set is really good for Gym Leader Challenge. Josh, before we get into it, you feel like it's going to be one of those sets that's defining for the format? Just okay? Or do you think it's just going to flop like some of the other sets have done in the past?
I think right now with how Surging Sparks is, I think it might have a little bit of shakeup, but I don't think it's going to shake it up so much. Like some sets in the past have been. Togekiss, like we're going to talk about here in a little bit, is going to be a fun, add into Psychic. But going into the whole Surging Sparks set, I think it's going to be just above okay, and just below meta changing. I think it's going to be an okay set.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Usually when you look at format warping sets, I think back to Paradox Rift is one, and that set had really strong, powerful trainers in it. We had the technical machines introduced during that set. Surging Sparks does not have good trainers. I think we're going to see some really cool Pokemon in this set that you can definitely build around, but you're not going to see kind of like that staple trainer that you really want to see from a set that's going to kind of change how things are played. Like Arvin was a game-changing card. Colress's Tenacity, to a certain degree. There's just not that quality of trainer in this set. So, with that being said, let's hop into it. And you mentioned the Togekiss. What better place to start than with that card? Togekiss, really cool card. Got great stats here. It is a stage 2, 140 HP. For 3 colorless energy, which is important to note. It has the speed wing attack, which does 140. But what's most interesting about a card like this is its ability, Wonder Kiss. So when your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out, you get to flip a coin. If heads, you can take one more prize card. Not that it matters to us in Gym Leader Challenge, but the effect of it does not stack, but you can only ever have one Togekiss active.
Yeah.
So, Josh, Togekiss, is it a meme or is it the dream?
I think it's definitely something to dream about. I don't think you would think looking at it that it's a meme just because it's Togekiss, but other than that, I think this card is going to be actually pretty interesting and pretty, it's going to make Psychic kind of fun, depending on if you play a big basic deck. And just throw in a Togekiss. You might have to take out some stage 2 Pokemon to, fit it a little bit. Maybe instead of Tinkaton, you might play Togekiss. But with the Dimension Valley being able to take down the cost of it. You can also use it to take out other Pokemon as well. But Togekiss, on a 50-50 chance taking an extra prize, that is totally worth, trying out and putting into your deck. And I think that, it's definitely has potential to swing a game into your favor. It also has potential to be a target for your opponent because, they might want to make sure that you're not going to take another prize again. So they're going to have to boss up or gust up that Togekiss to take it out, and leaving one of your other attackers open and ready for business the next turn. But Togekiss, I think it's something to be not to be, trifled with too much. I don't think we should take it lightly as a joke. I think we should treat it seriously because it is definitely a card that has a lot of fun potential, actually.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I think it has a lot of fun potential if you're playing it. Obviously, if you're on the other side and you're seeing your opponent like flip heads against you continuously, it might be a little frustrating, as coin flips tend to be in any trading card game. But I do think this Togekiss is really fun to kind of look at, like you mentioned. Psychic having lost an important tool in what Marshadow was, and Marshadow really slowed the game down and let Psychic kind of dominate games with its overall card quality, where it didn't really have fast starts to begin with. So now that it loses that ability to slow the game down, but it's still not like the fastest deck out there. Like, you're not going to see a lot of different turbo Psychic decks, although the next card we're going to talk about maybe is going to change things up a bit. So I do think that having a combat mechanic like Togekiss is pretty good. And like you mentioned, I think Tinkaton might be the drop-off, and then you've got Gallade in your deck still for those boss-ups if you need to. You're playing really strong bases. You got Necrozma that hits big damage. You have the Mewtwo that can hit big damage. It's got to be the active, and so that's kind of important. It's like spread decks necessarily can't take advantage of Togekiss. Like, imagine if it just said, like, any of your opponent's Pokemon, and you just try to take one of those multi-prize turns, like Psychic Spread likes to do, and you're just, like, flipping 5 coins. Like, of course you're going to get an extra prize. So, a really balanced card in that degree. And then, like, I just like that it's just a good attacker. You mentioned its synergy with Dimension Valley, which lowers the attack cost by 1 colorless for these Psychic Pokemon. For 2 energy, it's hitting 140. Like, this thing can take KOs and then maybe an extra prize because its ability works that way too, right? Like, Togekiss seems really fun. I'm with you. It's definitely a dream. Will people maybe lean into the meme? Maybe. Like, will you see, like, what's the stadium? Glimwood Tangle?
Yeah, Glimwood Tangle.
Yeah, like cards like that maybe to take advantage. I'm trying to think if Glimwood Tangle is attacks or abilities. There's one of them that's
I'm pretty sure it's just attacks.
So it might have to be like Will then, because I think Will is just like the next time that you flip a coin, which is a supporter. You get to like change the results of it. So something to think about. But Togekiss, definitely a sweet card. You gonna be slotting this into your Psychic list?
I think I might, but as much as it hurts me, I love Tinkaton so much. It's just it became one of my instant top 5 Pokemon of all time when it was announced. Who doesn't love something with a giant hammer that's pink? So I was like, I don't know. But me saying that Togekiss would slot in for Tinkaton hurt me greatly when I said that. So
that's all right. The same way when people were like, we're going to put Tinkaton in our list instead of Dragapult. Like, oh, no?
Please, no.
All right. Well, we just talked about Psychic's slow starts to games, but that might be shifting, and this Smoochum might be at the head of what these Psychic decks tend to look like. Andrew Mahone recently had a stream, and this Smoochum looked really good in some of his lists. So this Smoochum, baby Pokemon, all baby Pokemon tend to have 30 HP, free retreat, which is really nice, and a free attack called Delightful Kiss. With this attack, you get to search your deck for 2 basic Psychic Energy, and you get to attach them to one of your Pokemon. So, pretty good at charging up attackers, no energy cost, and free retreat. Seems good, Josh, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Actually, like whenever I did a set review a couple weeks ago, and I kind of lowered this below Cleffa and below, I think I had it before. Oh, Shining Mew or something like that. Not Shining Mew, but anyways, I had it lower than a couple cards. And, I got to see it on stream a little bit and I get to see more talk about it. I think it is pretty good, especially in a big basic deck to where you can just have that guy out in the active, use Delightful Kiss, get 2 free energy out of your deck, and you don't have to worry too much about energy acceleration from other Pokemon. You can still play your Malamar, but maybe you don't play Xatu, as much. And then, going into, turn 2, you might still have a Smoochum out, and you might just say to yourself, hey, another 2 energy, let's go for it. And then you're set probably for the remainder of the game, with 4 energy out, probably half the energy that you have in the deck already in play. So I think Smoochum is better than I gave it credit for. But I think it's kind of funny that this little Smoochum is better than Shining Mew. Shining Mew is just so beautiful, such a beautiful card. It's just missing a free attack.
Yeah, the free attack is big, right? So like Shining Mew has a lot of upsides. The biggest downside, of course, is Shining Mew is like $40, and this Smoochum is like 10 cents. So like Smoochum is the new hotness just for the price alone. But do I own this Shining Mew? Of course. I own this because Roger, Acco Blubber, played a Turbo Garbodor list, and I said I'd have to have it. So, of course, I invested money in the Shining Mew. Is it obsolete? I don't know. I think that if you're a, kind of aggressive basic psychic list, you might end up running both of these if you want to. I do think that Shining Mew is still really good because Shining Mew is just 2 energy cards. So you still have the option to get special energy with the Shining Mew, which I do think is really important. And, especially these psychic lists that run like horror and counter energy, and they got the mystery energy too. There's so many good special energies that these psychic lists can run. And if you're even throwing like, Okie Dokie in the list, like, then you can like put like a dark energy on it if you want to with the Shining Mew. Free retreat still, but it also lets you diversify where you put the energy. Shining Mew is in any way you like, whereas Smoochum is just one specific Pokemon. Obviously, upside from Smoochum is that not only do you get to attach the 2 energy to something on your bench, but you also get to like a different place for your attachment for turn, right? So you get 3 energies in play on something different. And then, with Smoochum, where Shining Mew, obviously, its attack is 1 psychic energy, a little less, great in that mindset. But I don't know. It just seems like redundancy matters a lot. And you can even throw Turbo Energize into the mix if you really want to get into it that way.
You're looking for the speediest of energy attachments. We're looking to get 8 energy attach. We're rain dancing in Psychic now.
Right? it feels right. I'm like you. I kind of lowered this Smoochum a little lower. Like when I was thinking about rating it, I was like, this Smoochum isn't pretty good. And then I watched Mahone's stream, and that man knows this format. That man knows his cards. If he's thinking about putting a card into his deck, it makes you take a second look, and then you see it do some pretty cool things, and you're like, I was wrong. And I'm okay. I'm a big enough man to accept I was wrong about this tiny baby Smoochum.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it's a pretty good card. Definitely good for Psychic, and I mean you could play Cleffa and Smoochum in the same deck depending on how you open up. You might want to get energy, or you might want to draw up to 7 cards because you played all the cards that you had in your hand. So there's all sorts of different ways. Psychic has just so many different options, and I think regardless whether you choose the most optimal option or not, you can still find a lot of success playing any type of Psychic deck.
Yeah, agreed. And, I was just talking about all these 30 HP Pokemon. I know somewhere, Z-Man is just like rubbing his hands being like, here's my Monkey Dory's time, baby.
Hexmaniac.
All right. This card is one of my favorite cards to get printed in a while. And that's, I'm going to say the name. I'm going to butcher the name. I don't know the Lake Trio's name at all. Like I played these games when I was, really into the VGC. But Uxie? It's got to be Uxie, right?
Uxie. Yeah, whichever one.
Yeah. But I'm a spread guy. You guys know this. So Uxie's got reasonable stats, basic, 70 HP, 1 retreat cost. For 1 psychic energy, you can use Painful Memories. This attack puts 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. Just a really, really strong attack. Then you've got other spread options. I don't know. What are you feeling about this Uxie, Josh?
I think whenever I saw this Uxie, I thought of you. I knew you were going to be excited about this card, especially for Dusk Buddies. I thought it was going to be really good for that, or just spread Psychic in general was going to love this. You could probably just throw this in a Lost on Psychic deck because you can get it with Buddy Buddy Poffin, and you might play it over Meloetta because it's guaranteed 2 damage counters to everything instead of, flip 3 coins for each heads get 10. So I think Uxie's really good just all around. 1 retreat cost is 70, so it's below that. It's above that 60 HP threshold that we want to be above. Searchable with Buddy Buddy Poffin, 1 psychic energy. It's just a really good card overall, and I'm pretty excited to see it. It gets past any damage reducers as well. So I mean, Uxie is going to be a good card. I think it's probably, if we had to go 4 out of 5, I'd probably go 4.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't discuss a 5 scale.
That's fine. 4 out of 5 Snorlaxes from Josh. You heard it first. I'm going to give it, if I had to give it on a scale of 1 to 5 Snorlaxes, I'm going to give it, 3 Gyarados probably, no,
3
Gyarados. I love this card. Everything about it's great. There's an Azelf, an XY promo Azelf that has a similar attack, 1 energy Shining Eyes. It puts 2 damage counters on anything that already has damage counters. And so you usually play that in these spread lists. So now you have a definitive way to spread 2 on turn 1 with Uxie. Because like you mentioned, you were playing Meloetta before. In Meloetta, you had to flip 3 coins. For each heads, you did 10 damage, not damage counters, which could be nice into some fighting matchups when you got to count weakness, but was overall pretty bad, into like bench barrier decks, which like you're not going to play a bench barrier against Psychic Spread usually anyway, because it's just like a free prize. But, just like it was pretty bad into some matchups, and always the triple heads just made you cry. So like having this option as like a sure thing just makes me so happy. And then you mentioned like, we talked about Dusk Buddies, the Chandelure that can put damage counters, the Dust Noir that can manipulate dust counters, and the Lunala, which is going to double up things. Just like Psychic Spread in general is getting a huge buff from this set. And me personally, I could not be happier, because these decks probably suffered more from the bannings than almost any other type, but we're still just talking about Raikou. I mean, these decks lost Dust Skull, which is a really big part of what the Dust Noir decks were trying to do, because you could get to the Dust Noir really quickly this way. And then we also lost Marshadow, which like if you're a spread deck, your job is to slow the game down, and Marshadow lets you do that. We lost all that. So now we need to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit faster with the way we spread it. We need to make up for a turn. And so Uxie really makes up for the turn that we lost when we could shuffle our opponent's hand into their deck and let them draw 4 and let them kind of slow their setup. So really, really happy with this card. We'll be playing it as soon as possible.
Yeah, in 2022, I played against a Dusk Buddies deck, or like just a Dusknoir Lunala spread. And I remember that was the first time I saw that deck, and I had to read all the cards. I was like, what is happening? But this deck for sure made me sweat so bad. And it came down to the very last +3 turns that we had. And I'm pretty sure I pulled out the win on that one. But I was sweating. That Lunala almost took it out of me.
That Lunala is busted. It's so hard to pull off, but I love that Lunala. The taking 6 prizes with a Psychic Spread deck, there's no better feeling in Gym Leader Challenge than just being like, give them all to me. Give them all to me. And that Lunala lets you do it. People see it coming from a mile away, though. There's the problem.
Yeah, I always tried to make sure to stop it.
Well, besides Uxie, we are getting like a full playset of the Lake Trio. So the next one up is Mesprit, or Mesprit, or however you want to pronounce it. It's your language, you control it. This card's really interesting. So 70 HP again, 1 energy retreat. It's got 2 attacks, and both of them are pretty decent. The first attack is Full Heart. It's 1 colorless energy. Attach up to 2 basic psychic energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. So intentionally a way to, kind of speed up and ramp up into some attacks. And then Guardian Burst, which is really kind of a neat attack. So 2 psychic energy is its cost. 160 damage is what it does, but only if you have the other 2, Uxie and Azelf, on your bench. Well, we've already talked about an Uxie and an Azelf, and we got one more Azelf to talk about. I don't know, Mesprit, is this the dream, or is it a meme, Josh?
The more I think about it, I want it to be a dream. And it's totally, you can totally pull it off. But only, like you said, if you have Uxie and Azelf on the bench. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any synergy with Dimension Valley where you can just put one energy. So whenever you do play this and you do have Uxie and Azelf, you should probably also have some type of way to get an energy accelerant as well as an energy on there. I think it's very possible to get it done at least once per game, and possibly many, depending on if you play Rescue Carrier to get 2 Pokemon from the discard back into your hand. You can play it with Clara as well. So there's all sorts of different ways to make sure that you can pull off this attack. You just got to make sure that you have an energy accelerant. You could also use Raihan to make sure that you get a double energy attachment as well, by attaching one from the discard and maybe one from your hand or from your deck, or maybe you use Raihan to search for that other Uxie or the Azelf to get it onto the bench. So I am leaning kind of in the middle, because they will probably make sure to either disrupt your hand or take out something that you have. So if you do plan on using Mesprit, I would probably try to make sure that you have it out first and not use Uxie or Azelf to attack with first, if that makes sense. You want to make sure that you are able to pull off that attack, So I think it's definitely doable. And I want to say dream. The more I'm talking about it, the more I say I think it's pretty dreamy.
Yeah, I mean, I want to agree with you too, but I'm sliding more towards the meme side of things. It's just weird how, like, obviously there's like a little bit of synergy between the Lake Trio to a certain degree, right? Like, we're going to see the new Azelf in a bit, and it does definitely synergize with what Uxie's trying to do. But this Mesprit is kind of just like out of nowhere. Like, it doesn't really, like, when you look at the Hitmon combo, which is like maybe like the other way to kind of like compare this to, you've got 3 Pokemon you need to attack in succession that kind of like work together in what they're trying to do. And these 3 like feel like they're powerful and feel like they could fit in like a couple different spots, but like they don't feel like a cohesive 3, in my opinion. They feel like a cohesive 2 with like another really strong 3, but it just doesn't feel like it meshes the way that you would want it to. So I'm leaning towards the meme. But if you do want to make the dream happen, obviously Josh just listed a ton of ways that you can make that happen, Dimension Valley not being one of them, but maybe this is like the double up Gardevoir could potentially see play in this list, right?
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, it's just something else to think about, but Lake Trio, people are going to try it.
Yeah, it's definitely like Uxie and Mesprit are part of 2 different decks. You have your big basic deck, and Mesprit's not big. It's just 70 HP. Hits big, but then you have a spreader along with it. So you got to kind of choose how you want to go about. Do you want it to be like a spread with like a little bit of spice for Mesprit, or do you want to have 2 almost dead cards in your hand in your deck and have a big basic deck? And I'm probably leaning towards the spread with a little bit of spice.
Yeah. I mean, it's just something else. Like, the Mesprit is just like, its attack is so conditional, right? You need to have both of those things on your bench. So, like, what's your bench space look like if you're trying to make this Mesprit? Spread decks do want a wall breaker, but having a conditional wall breaker feels rough. Like, you need that wall breaker to come in. Like, there's a reason why we play Copycat Mimikyu, right? It's so easy to power up. It's basically, itself plus a Gallade gets you Raihan energy, like, and it's a 1-card combo. Even 1 energy dimension value. It's a 1-card combo by itself. It does the thing. So that card just feels a lot more consistent as a wall breaker. It doesn't need all these conditions of having 2 energy on it, plus 2 things on the bench. So that's where I'm leaning towards the dream or the meme side of things. But like, am I going to try it 100%? Like, you guys know me. I'm going to be playing Lake Trio all day, every day.
Yeah. I do agree with that. Good points on Mesprit.
All right. Now, the Azelf, the new Azelf that we're getting, it is pretty cool. I mentioned it. It synergizes well with the Uxie that spreads 2 damage everywhere. So the Neurokinesis is the name of his attack. It's got the same exact stats as the others, by the way. 70 HP and 1 retreat cost. And then Neurokinesis is its attack. It's 1 psychic, 1 colorless. And then for 10 damage, it does 10 more for each damage counter on all of your opponent's Pokemon. So if your opponent goes, full bench and you go Uxie, and you put 2 damage counters on all 6 Pokemon, that's, 60 damage. Was that? No, it's 2 damage on each of them. 120 damage plus 10, that's 130 after just one turn of spreading. So, this Nerkinesis attack, synergizes pretty well. It's pretty strong. We see this same type of thing on, a Wobbuffet, which sees a lot of play. Obviously, Wobbuffet has a really good ability, being able to stop your opponent's abilities. But Psychic Assault is Wobbuffet's attack, same attack cost, but then it only does 10 plus 10 more on the active. So, Azelf is a better attacker than Wobbuffet, which already sees play. I don't know. What are you feeling about this Azelf, Josh?
I think, speaking of wall breakers, Azelf is a perfect one, especially later on in the game. Because it doesn't matter how much it is on the active. You could have a fresh Pokemon, big Pokemon on the active, but it's all damage counters combined. So if you have a good, 10 damage counters out there, or 20 damage counters out there, you have 210 damage with that. It's pretty cool, actually. I forgot Azelf had that. I knew that, but I didn't remember until just now. I think this Azelf is going to be your wall breaker on any of those decks. Forget not Uxie, Mesprit. Forget that Mesprit. Forget everything I said about Mesprit. Azelf is going to be your guy. And it definitely synergizes with Dimension Valley, allowing you to hit for 1 colorless less, so you can use it for 1 psychic. Azelf is also searchable, like most of them, with the Buddy Buddy Poffin. So definitely Azelf has some potential to, hit big or small or whatever you need it to hit, as long as you have the active damage counters out there.
Yeah. So obviously, the hardest thing about this card is that you have to give up the other Azelf in a spread deck, right? The other Azelf has been a staple in so many of these spread decks. 1 energy, put 2 damage counters on everything that already has damage counters on it. Then, if you're playing this Azelf and your opponent happens to scoop up net something, or happens to heal some damage, I feel like you're a lot softer if you're playing this as your wall breaker into those sorts of strategies. If your opponent just parallels themselves and then gets rid of 12 damage counters off the board, this Azelf is kind of not as good as you would hoped it had been. So as a surefire wall breaker, it just feels a little lacking in that department. But I do see it being really well, playing really well into these styles of decks, as long as your opponent isn't doing one of those things to you.
Oh, definitely. I think it's definitely something that needs to be experimented with. May not, like we've spoke before, may not be the most optimal, but it definitely has potential to have a little bit of fun and a little bit of spice in your deck.
Plus silver border.
Yes. What was your whenever Silver Borders came out, what were your first thoughts?
So I haven't really been playing when Silver Borders were announced. I hadn't been playing the Pokemon TCG that long. I had just gotten back into base set to Fossil and had just begun kind of exploring what Gym Leader Challenge was. So I'm colorblind. So I like color and details, attention to details, those sorts of things don't bother me at all. So I care zero about it.
Yeah, you were like, I thought it was gray already.
Right. So yeah, so that's my thought on Silver Borders. I know there are some people that go all out, I'm going to buy the Japanese version so I can have all Silver Borders. Cool. If that's your thing, enjoy it. I'm glad that Gym Leader Challenge allows foreign language cards for that reason. You can optimize your decks to how you want to. I hope that in the future we don't have any issues that big events, let's let Gym Leader Challenge have and play cool niche cards and play foreign language cards. That's one of my biggest gripes about large events, is that come on, let's understand what Gym Leader Challenge is about. It's about playing the cards that you don't get to play in other formats, and foreign language cards is part of that, besides just single prizers too. So anyway, I'm gonna hop off my soapbox here.
And it's a good box to be on.
And let's get back to our set review. Well, I guess Josh, before that, what are your thoughts on Silver Borders?
I actually like them. Yeah, they grew on me. They're nice, but I do hate the way they warp. They warp so bad, the hollows. I don't know if you've noticed. I'm in Oklahoma, so it's a little humid over here. And these things you can just leave out on a table, and they just get all warpy. It's kind of bad.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't really noticed that too much. I double sleeve everything and then just shove them in a deck box. So.
Yeah. But it's not bad. I definitely miss the yellow classic border, but silver borders they're looking pretty.
Yeah, they do look nice. All right. Set review. Back to it. Back to spread. I mean, like this set spread is just going bonkers. Like I'm just like, oh my goodness, there's so many cool things. So Cofagrigus, a new printing of Cofagrigus here. 120 HP to retreat. It also gives you access to the Pumpkaboo that can, get rid of a stadium in play. I think Pumpkin Pit is the ability. So like having a utilitarian basic is kind of neat when you think about. Oh wait, I'm thinking of the Gourgeist. Never mind. Back to Cofagrigus. But Cofagrigus,
yeah, I was like, wait.
Oh, thanks, Josh. That's what you're here for. I've been so excited about the Pumpkaboo because I want to play because of this card. I want to play the Gourgeist that doesn't have an ability over the Miss Magus that everyone's been playing in these psychic lists just because of this card. So that's where my brain went. But Cofagrigus is a bonkers card. For 1 energy, you get to use Law of the Underworld, which, by the way, sweet attack name. But you get to put 6 damage counters on each Pokemon that has an ability. So yours and your opponent's. Its second attack doesn't matter. No one's going to spooky shot. That's 3 energy, 100 damage. But Cofagrigus, this is definitely a card. Right, Josh?
Oh, it's definitely a card. It's one of those, an eye for an eye card. You got to make sure that you're not damaging yourself too much. But it definitely has a place in the spread with so many ability Pokemon that all these different decks play, especially grass, water. Colorless plays a lot of low HP ones that can take 2/3 of their health in just one of these attacks. It's kind of crazy to think about. This could take out a Bidoof, I'm pretty sure, just straight up, because it has that carefree countenance ability. It doesn't take it from it just protects it from damage, not damage counters. But yeah, Cofagrigus is definitely another force to be reckoned with, man. It's pretty cool card. I like it. It's spooky. We just got past Halloween, so little shout out to the spooky cards, the spooky type. But Law of the Underworld, sweet name, like you said. 1 energy is the cost for that. And you just got to make sure that maybe you don't have as many ability Pokemon yourself out. And I don't think some of the ones that you're constantly spreading with do have it. Am I correct, Jeff?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot, which is why I brought that Gourgeist. So, most lists in the past, you're playing Miss Magus, which Miss Magus basically says if it's knocked out at full health, you put damage counters on your opponent's active. I think you get to put 8 onto them. So, Cofagrigus is in, direct opposition to what that Miss Magus is trying to do. And so when you're thinking about building this psychic spread list, what does it look like? I know some of those spread lists are playing Malamar. I've really liked Malamar in my list. Are you still playing another ability Pokemon on your bench like that? Even Monkey Dory. If you're thinking about going the Monkey Dory route, are you going to be playing that on your bench? 2 Cofagrigus attacks and your Monkey Dory's down. Kirlia is the same way. Are you evolving your Kirlia? 20 HP left. Gets, one-shotted by everything in the format. You're going to want to get into that Gallade ASAP. And then after 3 turns, that's gone if you can't do something with this Cofagrigus. So it's just really interesting how kind of your deck building needs to kind of shift, or how you need to stagger your benching. Obviously you can't Cofagrigus in the first couple turns because your opponent probably isn't setting up their ability Pokemon rather quickly, unless they're something like Colorless, which is probably going to plop down Fan Rotom, and then maybe the Oranguru, or some of those other things. So it's just interesting how this card's going to work. I very easily, even though this card seems busted on the surface, I could very easily just see this card not working because Psychic just has so many good abilities, and the collateral damage that it's going to cause to yourself might not be worth the 6 damage counters on what your opponent's doing in the long run. So that's something to think about. And then, a similar card is this Weavile that has seen play from time to time. In fact, last night, Halloween, It just won at Full Grip Games, Dark Spread, and then I won on Wednesday night with Dark Spread playing this card. It's funny how it took down my locals and Full Grip Games. But Weavile has been in the format forever, but there's one key difference. So Weavile is 1 energy, and it does 60 damage to each Pokemon that has an ability. But the fact that it says damage and not damage counters is like so different, because you can never ever get around bench barrier with Weavile, because the second that you play Silent Lab, you are turning off the ability on the bench barrier Pokemon, so Rule of Evil doesn't hit it. And if you play Hex, you're getting rid of all abilities. So Rule of Evil does 0 damage. So there's no way to get around bench barrier with Rule of Evil. You have to hope that your opponent has like evolution, ability Pokemon in play. And then on top of that, like, you're hitting your Liepard, which only has 100 HP. You know, if you can't play Spiritomb in these decks with Rule of Evil. So Rule of Evil has been, you know, really difficult to pull off for that reason. And then Cofagrigus comes in, and you can use damage counters. So much better. Just so much better.
Yeah. I think Cofagrigus might be something that you wait to play. It's easy to get going, so you could probably get it going about mid game or late game once you got some good spread out, and just use it as like a big 2, 3, 4 prize finisher towards the end, instead of and making sure and using it then whenever you know that your Pokemon on your side, you know, can take a hit, as long as the reward outweighs the not reward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Put yourself behind, grab yourself a counter energy. Something to think about too.
Yeah. So I think Cofagrigus has its place. You might just have to be a little bit more thoughtful of when and how you use it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's gonna take some thinking. You guys know me. Thinking's not my strong suit. I actually think it is, but people have told me otherwise.
Now, there's a difference between thinking and taking action.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am a man of thinking.
I think about taking action all the time. It's one of my pastimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, from Psychic, we're going to move on to Lightning, because these are the 2 types that have needed a little bit of help. And Psychic definitely feels like it got some good help. Let's see if Lightning got the same. So, Lightning got this new card, and this new card is probably part of the reason why Raikou did see a banning. There's Magneton, 100 HP, new Magneton, 1 retreat. It's got a decent attack, 40 damage for 2 energy, like nothing world breaking, but you're playing it for its ability, Overvolt Discharge. So once during your turn, you can attach up to 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your Lightning Pokemon in any way you like. If you do that, the Pokemon gets knocked out, your opponent gets a prize, and you're behind, potentially, on prizes.
Yep.
So this Magneton seems really good. It's a callback to another Magneton that had the call signal, which knocked itself out and got you 3 supporters. So there's these Magnetons all over this place. They're just knocking themselves out. Josh, how do you see Overvolt Discharge Magneton kind of fitting into where Lightning currently is?
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I do play the Electro that gives you, you can blow it up and it gives you 2 special energy lately here.
Buzz Zap? Is that Buzz Zap?
Yeah, Buzz Zap Thunder or something like that. I've been using that a lot lately in my own Lightning spread deck, and it's super useful in being able to get, a quick 2 energies onto your, let's see, your Raichu that has that spread attack for 2 energies, or your Electivire that takes 3 energies. That's 2 out of the 3. And Magneton might be a good replacement for that, in the fact that you can get it from the discard. Usually you're trying to discard Lightning Energy for your 2 Dynamotors that you're using already. So Magneton is a good way to just kind of get 3 out, and possibly 2 more with your Dynamotors as well. But I think Magneton is pretty good, at least in my own deck. I think this is a better version of Electrode. Electrode, guaranteeing yourself 2 energies attachable With Magneton, you might not have 3 energies in the discard. So there's a little bit of leeway there. Magneton isn't searchable through Level Ball, unfortunately, which makes it a little bit, clunkier than the Magneton with Call Signal or anything like such as Electrode that has 90 HP or less. So Magneton might be a little bit clunky going in. It's definitely not a bad card whatsoever. I think it's going to see a lot of play, especially in might allow to reoccur a Regieleki pretty quickly. And instead of having to take it down to the bench to refeed it with your Dynamotors, you can just Terra Spark again with your Overvault Discharge after you've already discarded 2 of them, And I believe it lets you do it in any way you like too. So you don't have to attach all 3 to Regieleki. You can attach 2 there and then 1 on the bench. So I think Magneton definitely has some awesome potential. It just might not be as easy as a Call Signal or the Electrode I'm speaking of. But Magneton is a pretty good card, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. My biggest issue with it, and you gave us some examples of this, but to whom are you attaching with Overvolt Discharge, right? Like, we've lost Raikou, which is like hands down the best attacker. So you've got the Regieleki that you mentioned, whose Terra Spark does 120 to the active and 40 to 2 things on the bench for lightning, colorless, but you have to discard all lightning energy from Terra Spark. Then you got Zorora, Discharge does 50 times the amount of lightning energy you discard, and it's a 3 energy attack cost. And then you've got Luxray that for 3 energy does 180, but you can only put Luxray onto the bench if you're behind on prizes, unless you're playing its pre-evolutions. So you can't Magneton to go behind on prizes to play the Luxray, because it won't be in play to attach the energy. And then is Zorora, is Regieleki, are they good enough? Like, you're giving up a prize, you're attaching 3 energy, but then those energy just get discarded if you're using one of those first 2 options that I mentioned. It's just what attacker really wants 3 energy from Magneton now? And I think we might just be waiting for it for a while. I just don't know if it's going to be worth it for right now. Maybe if you're trying to continuously chain attackers and you have a way to take multiple prizes, because you're going to need a comeback mechanic with a Magneton in your deck. I just don't know. I just don't see it in my mind right now how I'm using this card to get ahead and stay ahead with the attackers and lightning that are currently available to me.
Yeah. It's definitely, Call Signal is definitely probably the more optimal Magneton to play over the Overvault Discharge. But there's definitely all the cards that we're going to talk about today have so much different potential that can be messed with. There's a lot of lightning cards out there that might have some unlocked potential that we may not have thought of yet. And we're going to have some thinkers, coming to the chat with that once we get Overvault Discharge, legal to play. So definitely keep a lookout for that Overvault Discharge ability. And, it might surprise us a little bit more than we think.
I think so too. Yeah. People in chat, I think I'm missing it. Let me know, what are you going to use Overvolt Discharge to do? Who are you attaching to? That's what I want to know. Because again, I've been really, really liking my Lightning Zone list, but just the discard of the energy is just so tough, especially with an ability like this. So I'm struggling to see it, but someone will, and I'm excited to see what those lists look like.
Mm-hmm.
All right, a cool card. Such a cool card. I'm kind of mad about this card, Josh. I'm kind of mad about it. We've got another Tapu Koko. Good stats. 120 on a basic. 1 energy retreat cost. You're used to seeing Tapu Koko have free retreat. I don't know why this one opted for 1 retreat, but it's got good attacks. It's got 2 good attacks. So for 1 energy, you get Summon Lightning, which lets you search your deck for up to 2 lightning Pokemon. Not even basics, just 2 lightning Pokemon, which is really good, and you get to put those into your hand. And then you've got Prize Count, which is lightning, colorless. It does 90 base, and then if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, this attack does 90 more. Maybe this is what your Magneton is attaching to. Josh, where do you see this Tapu Koko fitting into in the moment?
Man, this Tapu Koko, I love it. I think the reason why it doesn't have free retreat is because it's too good. I mean, you have Summon Lightning, which helps you get set up if you're in a pinch. Definitely able to just attach one, search for 2 lightning Pokemon that you may not have, and be able to play them the next turn. It's awesome. I love playing Alolan Vulpix in my own water deck, and it's great to be able to just hand pick the Pokemon that you may need to play for that next turn. Of course, there's always a chance of hand disruption, but with the first hand, 60 cards, are they going to really have the 2 or 3 cards of hand disruption that they need to do that? And are they even willing to disrupt their own hand for that? So sometimes you got to think about those things. I think Summon Lightning is a great attack for Tapu Koko. And then prize count is awesome because you are able to, overvault discharge, put yourself behind on prizes, and then hit for 180 damage. And I think that's what Lightning needs, is somebody who can hit some heavier damage without too hard of a condition. And since Lightning already likes to play from behind a lot of the time, you end up being in a good prize count for this Tapu Koko. I think it's awesome. I think you might not see it so much in spread decks. I think it's interchangeable in spread decks because you want the free retreat, flying flip Tapu Koko in your spread deck a lot. But maybe in some of the new archetypes for Lightning right now, I think there's going to be some new electric or lightning archetypes kind of propping up that you can play around with this new Tapu Koko, the overall discharge. There's all sorts of different things that are kind of opened up now for us. And I think Tapu Koko is going to be one of those awesome cards that can be played in any lightning list. And I'm just excited to see what this card's going to do. I think this might be one of the better cards in the set that's coming out.
Yeah, I have to agree with you all the way. This Tapu Koko is really, really good. Again, you mentioned flying flips, got to stay in spread decks. I mean, it does 20 everywhere for 2 energy, and then it has free retreat. It synergizes really well with Zapdos. I think the best thing about Tapu Koko is we just know that lightning decks are so reliant on Zebstrika. Like, that card is the engine that keeps those decks churning along and finding the cards that they need to do things that Lightning needs to do. And so Tapu Koko getting evolutions lets you get that as soon as you can. And I think that that's really, really key to these decks. And I think that's its biggest thing. The added bonus of 90 damage is already a pretty reasonable number to hit. That hits most you're hitting artillery numbers, and you're hitting maybe Cricketune numbers. These are Pokemon that see play that have 90 HP. So you can be taking prizes with Tapu Koko as long as evolving basics also typically have 70 or less. But 180 is a really good number to hit in Gym Leader Challenge, as we've seen with Thumping Snorlax, and some of the other Pokemon that can do that same damage. So just having a big basic that can do big damage is just really super important. It feels like this day and age in Gym Leader Challenge. So I'm going to be playing this Tapu Koko. I think it fits really well into where we're going to be going with Lightning in the future.
Yeah, and even with the new Satitan coming out, I think I bring that up just because I love the new Satitan. But this Tapu Koko can knock it out if you play a Hex Maniac. It does have 180 HP still, but if you don't play Hex Maniac, it takes 30 less damage. But if you do play it, you can just knock that sucker out really quickly. And then what are they going to play play a Wailord? I'm talking to myself here. What am I going to play a Wailord and just get knocked out in one hit?
Yeah, I mean, that was my main thought too, is hey, you have a way to just take care of Wailord again in one hit.
Yeah.
And the best part, the energy stays on the Tapu Koko.
Oh,
it doesn't get discarded. That's big. That's big, 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 big. Yeah,
I mean, Lightning doesn't struggle against water too much, but this Tapu Koko just makes it easier. It just makes it freelo almost against water, which is why I'm going to play Weakness Guard.
That's fair. I'm just going to maybe play another Ice Pokemon, I think, over Weakness Guard. All right, Josh, I set us up by saying that Magneton had nothing to attach to, and now I'm giving us 2 Pokemon to attach to. This card, I like it a lot too. Kilowattrel, 120 stage 1 retreat cost, very similar to Tapu Koko in terms of just base stats. And then Stormbolt is the attack that we're going to care about. 2 lightning and a colorless. It does 160. And then the cool thing about it is after you do your 160, you move all energy from it, and you get to shift that energy to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. Again, important things to note. 3 energy costs. We just finished talking about Magneton, Overvolt, Discharge. And the other thing is it's all energy. It's not just basic lightning. So special energy like counter energy can also be shifted back as well. I mean, I think this card is really good. I think lightning is getting the buff that it needs. Josh, you feel the same way?
I do feel the same way. I actually overlooked this in my own list, and I was like, man, this is actually a good card. I think it's pretty optimal energy. What's the word I'm looking for? Keeper, where you get to keep everything. Mm-hmm. So you get to make sure that you keep your energy safe from your opponent by just moving that around. And another thing is if they do gust, whatever you put the energy to, you still have Kilowattrel to use. And if you have a Magneton on the bench, or if you have any way of like putting that energy back on there with your 2 Dynamotors, or if you have that up, Kilowattrel is going to do it again. I think it's a really cool card. 160 is really good damage for pretty much anything in the game that it wants to take care of, unless if it has HP boosts or damage reductors. And I think this is a one lightning bird.
Yeah, I have to agree with everything you said. I mean, it feels like a good, strong, powerful card. The one thing I'm kind of looking at it is, like it says you have to move all the energy. I wish it was a may, but it's have to, right? There's no like tricky, like I'm going to keep it on my Kilowattrel so that you have to deal with it. No, you got to move it. And so now you might be stuck with a bird in the active, and maybe not able to attack the following turn. Fortunately, 1 energy retreat cost, so hopefully that's easy enough. A little bit of anti-synergy because your attachments are coming from the discard pile with your Dynamotors. So, like, it might come a point in the game when all your energy is there and this bird's in the active. But, I feel like if you got this bird off in an attack, you're feeling pretty good. And 120 is a number that's typically going to be knocked out. So, like, it's your own little, wishful baton, kind of, right? Like, move all that energy back. And it's really cool. So, this Kilowattrel, I'm definitely going to be trying it out. I know that Andrew Mahone had it in one of his lists on the Tricky Gem stream. I did not get a chance to see that. So, I'm excited to see what this card does in the future.
Yeah, I think their 1 retreat is really good. Imagine how busted it would be if it was free retreat. That would be insane. But, being able to just attach 1 and retreat if it's still in the active is a lot more doable than if it were, a 2 retreat cost. So, I think Kilowattrel's fun card.
Plus, you're playing a whole bunch of, like, switch cards, right? Because you got Zapdos in your deck. So, like...
it'll
be fine. That'll be fine.
Yeah, Tate and Liza, let's go.
All right, Optimal Blitzel. We just got to mention it. Maybe not Optimal Blitzel. I don't know. This is kind of a debate because it came up the other day in one of the Discords. I can't remember what. But we got a new Blitzel. 70 HP, 1 retreat, and then add-on is 1 energy, and it lets you draw a card. The Blitzel we were playing before, 60 HP, 1 retreat, but it basically had immunity on a coin flip. So it did 10 damage plus immunity, which, Zebstrika is so important to these decks that, like, maybe like keeping the Blitzel around if it had to be in the active is more important than drawing a card. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Josh? Do you have a choice between optimal, or do you think they're pretty interchangeable, or do you think it just doesn't matter? Just play the basic you want to.
I mean, you can definitely play the basic that you want to. I've done that in the past. But Blitzel, the new Blitzel, I'd have to say is probably optimal considering it does have 70 HP. But you don't have to play optimal all the time. But I do think that's the better Blitzel. That being said, I had a good train of thought, but I lost it. But Blitzel, the 70 HP one is, I think that you should always play a 70 HP over 60, especially if it's almost basically the same card with the 1 retreat, the same weakness to fighting. But I know where I was going to go with this. Anything that has to do with a coin flip, a lot of the time I will cut that from the deck. Aside from, Bramblegast with the flip for 80, I think that's still a really good card. The new Togekiss we talked about earlier, I think that is something that's worth putting in there, because it does carry its own weight and it hit for 140 HP. It's knocking out quite a bit of a few things. It's still hitting, Kyogre for the 140. So anything that has to do with coin flips, a lot of the time I'm just going to cut that out. And if that's the, the arguing point, I would say that definitely Blitzel with 70 HP is better than the Blitzel that you have to coin flip for. And add-on gets you another card. But you can still play whichever one you want, If you do well with the Blitzel with coin flip, play that Blitzel with coin flip. I just hate coin flips. Timer Ball is not a card to me. I'll always bring up Timer Ball.
That's fine. Timer Ball is the one to bring up. Timer Ball is the ultimate coin flip card. But I see what you're saying. I think more than ever, it is important to play those 70 HP basics, mostly because Raging Bolt got printed, and it's just so easy to do 60 to the bench now. Raging Bolt was like the turning point. I was on team Rapid Strike Sobble, Rapid Strike Remoraid for a really long time, because I can't tell you how many times I've had to use the Sobble's like call attack or whatever it is that gets Rapid Strike Pokemon to your bench, so I could have Sobble and Remoraid basically on turn 1. Like, that has come up more than once, so I've been the biggest fan of those Rapid Strike cards. But man, just getting one of those cards sniped with a Raging Bolt has felt so bad that I'm just going to play 70 HP basics over like anything else now. I feel like it's just time. Just feels like the right time.
Yeah, most of the time I'll always go with the 70, even if I like a specific card a little bit more. Even though, it hurts your heart trying to switch that really cool 60 HP mon out. Sometimes you got to go with the 70 if you want to have a fighting chance.
And this is interesting too, because there is a Blitzel that has like the illustrator art. Sweet art. Play the sweet art if you want to,
Oh yeah. The art's what kills me sometimes. If you got a really cool one and then they come out with like a very meh one, but the meh one is optimal, it really does stink.
It kills me with Riolu, because like the optimal Riolu was like 1 energy, 20 punch or something like that. But there's like a shiny like Riolu, and I think there's maybe even a full art Riolu. They're just so much better, but they're just so much worse on the surface. So
yeah. You just want to look at that Riolu that's looking at that weight, getting into its training arc.
That's me every day of my life. I'm that Riolu. All right, transitioning from 2 decks that got like 2 types that got really, really good upgrades from Psychic and Lightning that kind of needed a little bit of a push. I don't know if I've ever said that Psychic needed a push, but Psychic Spread might have. But,
Psychic Spread, definitely.
Yeah, so 2 types that got big boosts. We're heading to Grass, and Grass, for me, has felt kind of stuck in a rut for a bit. Kind of like the same level for a while now. Not that Grass is bad. It just feels like it's been the same. People have been trying to brew with it. New cards have come out, but I need some new Grass cards in my life. And so in steps Executor, and I really like this card. Stage 1, 130 HP. It's got 2 retreat, and it's got the Barrage O'Clock attack. I mean, come on. Barrage O'Clock? No idea what that's telling me, but I like it. So for 1 energy, it does 60 times the coin heads that you flip for the amount of energy on both Pokemon. It only costs 1, but it's taking into account all energy attacked to the actives. Coin flip Grass is a thing, right, Josh?
I talked about coin flips earlier. I forgot about this Executor, but I think whenever you have Rillaboom that gets out 2 energy from the deck, and a Venusaur that can double up with Jungle Totem, I think then you have a way of having fun with some coin flip decks. I think if you want to just load up a guy with some energy, I also think it's easy to recur with different ways to be able to get energy from the discard pile back into the deck. I think a coin flip stage 1 deck is definitely something that we could see. Like, it's definitely memey, but at the same time, it has the potential to be like not memey. Take something. If you're feeling lucky that day, you're probably gonna take home. You're probably gonna take home the win. I used to play a deck in Standard called there was a Pokemon. It was Cramorant VMAX, and it hit for 60, 70, 80 per heads of energy that you had on there, just like Barrage O'Clock or powerful needles. And I remember just hitting just massive numbers and loving it. So if you want to have fun and knowingly have fun, you can't be mad at yourself for playing a coin flip for damage deck. But if you want to have some fun, these are definitely the cards to do so.
Yeah, and there's so many good ones, right? Like you mentioned powerful needles from the Bramble Gas. The Bramble Gas that can just get huge because it gets 50 more HP for each prize card. But then powerful needles says for each energy attached to Bramble Gas, flip a coin, it does 80 damage for that. You double up with Venusaur, you can do a lot of damage with that Bramble Gas.
Yes.
Plus it can take a hit. There's a Blossom that's kind of the same as what Executor is doing, but it only counts actives. So it does 90 for each energy that's attached to the Blossom, if you flip a coin, of course. And then there's a Zarude that's pretty good. 2 energy, it does 70 if you flip 3 coins, 70 for each heads. Then you can throw in cards like Trick Coin or Glimwood Tangle, which is a card we talked about earlier. And we can now confirm that Glimwood Tangle is just an attack, not an ability. So it does not work with Togekiss. But Glimwood Tangle and Trick Coin lets you reflip basically for an attack. So there are all these tools to make coin flip grass work. I think it's pretty cool, and I would love to lose to this.
Oh, definitely me too. I would love to see somebody just hit 10 out of 10 heads, man. I might build this deck just to have some fun with it. It looks so much fun. I love this style because you can't be mad. You're just having the time of your life playing these cards.
You say that until you flip all tails. When your deck is Timer Ball, right? When you make this deck on Cardboard Warriors, I need the title just to be Timer Ball deck.
Timer Ball deck. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to go home and make it right now.
All right. Well, after some fun, we get Vavilon, which is an interesting card. This one, was talked about a lot on Twitter. It's getting a really cool full art too. I actually think both arts for this card are really, really cool. So if you're listening to us and not watching it, go check out the Vavilon arts. Again, it's just a very pretty card. Now, Vavilon has a really good attack, but I think the attack is good because you've got some pre-evolutions with an ability. So you've got the Scatterbug and the Spoopa that have adaptive evolution, which basically let it cheat evolutions. Like you can just instantly evolve them on play. So if you get Scatterbug into Spoopa into Vavilon, you can basically search for an evolution Pokemon for 1 energy using Evo Powder for each of your bench Pokemon and immediately evolve them. So it's really, really cool that you can do that. Josh, do you see that being a dream, or is it the meme?
I think that it's definitely something that could happen, but at what cost? Before I talk about the cost, I think that it's totally doable, especially if you get a ball guy on the first turn going second. I think you can just look for all these guys and you can have them, but I don't see it having too much. Grass decks are greedy in the space that they need on their bench, just in general. And I don't think that you'd want to play Vavilon too much over another specific card, such as TM Evolution, which is basically Vavilon, but on 1 tool card that can be searchable through all sorts of different means, such as Arven. But the difference between the two is Evo Powder lets you evolve everything, any target that you have. As long as you have that Pokemon available to you and it's not prized, you can evolve it. TM Evolution just lets you pick 2 on the bench, which most of the time you're only searching for 2. Sometimes those 2 might be Grotle, and then you're able to get what you need in the next coming turns with Turffield Stadium and Grotle and such as the like. But Vavilon does, if Vavilon does see play, it might be in more of a stage 1 grass deck where you have Eldegoss, you have Cherim, and those different types of energy accelerators where Eldegoss gets 2 from the deck and Cherim just accelerates those grass energy out. So if it's going to be in anything, it might be in that deck. But more times than not, which I haven't tested this personally, and I'm sure somebody will, you're not going to be able to get out everything that you need on turn 2 going first or turn 1 going second every time. So it's probably okay, more memey than anything.
I see that. When you're searching for 3 Pokemon, you mentioned like what's the cost? Well, you ball guy, you're ball guying for these 3 Pokemon: Scatterbug, Spoopa, Vavilon. Well, what's on your bench if you've just used 3 balls to get these Pokemon out? What are you evolving with Evo Power? How are you getting this into the active? Can it happen? 100%. Does your deck need to be filled with Pokemon Search? Of course. Well, what happens when you have a deck full of Pokemon Search? You do the cool thing. All your Pokemon are on the battlefield, and then you keep drawing Pokemon Search. So it can happen. It feels like it could happen. And then once you start kind of thinking through, like, what does this look like in my deck? How am I making my deck do the thing? Like, it will probably feel really fun and cool 1 out of 100 times. Like, I'm all about having fun. And so sometimes the cool Mimi thing is actually less fun because it never happens, right? And you have to build your deck a certain way. And I feel like Vavilon is that trap, right? Like, it's like, oh, yeah, look how cool this is. Because if you look at the card, too, like, it even has a really good second attack. Cutting Wind is 1 energy 90. Like, that's really good for 1 energy that you could potentially do on turn 2 of the game. But it just feels, again, I think I've used this word a couple times, it feels lacking. And I want to see it do well, but you mentioned it too, there's just better options, right? Like, you want to get Turtwig down, and if you can Turtwig and then TM Evolution and get Grottle, and then you're searching up your Pokemon the next turn, like, that's probably more consistent than trying to do this cool thing. So that's all I'm going to point out. We should all try it. We should all try to do it. The Vavilon thing.
By the time it's all said and done, you might as well had just used TM Evolution, because you probably only got 2 basics on the bench anyways with all the search that you did. So, play it if you want. Don't play it if you don't want it.
Facts of life. All right. Zarude. And I'm glad you mentioned this one, Josh. This is one that I missed. I completely missed this one. I really like this card. So Zarude is a basic with 120 HP. It's got 2 different attacks, and of course it's got 1 retreat cost. First attack, nothing special. Leaf Drain is do 20, heal 20. Not that bad. Second attack is what you want to see. Jungle Whip is 2 grass energy, 1 colorless. It does 80, and then you may put all energy attack to this Pokemon back into your hand, and it does 80 more. So effectively 160, and a way to conserve energy. There's a lot of good Zarudes, Josh. Do you see this Zarude being the new hotness?
I can definitely see its place. Basically, I would say the Zarude that we have for the repeated whip is pretty good. I mean, it's really good, especially in a Venusaur doubling energy deck where you're able to hit for some really big numbers. Even if you have just 3 attached to it, it's that 3 turns into 6. So you're able to hit for big numbers with Zarude. But if you're playing a stage 1 grass deck, I think the Jungle Whip one, the new one coming out, is going to be better in more of the stage 1 feeling, where you can Cotton Lift, take 2 energy out, and then I forget the ability Cherim uses, but it's just going to accelerate those energies. But the best thing about this card is what you wanted on the Kilowattrel, where it has that word "you may." So if you know that your opponent isn't going to be able to attack, on the next turn, you can just keep that on there and hit 160 again. So I think this Zarude is probably going to be, if it does see play, it's going to be more of a stage 1 grass deck, which stage 1 grass deck has been seeing some success lately. I think JD had won a recent one lately. And I think the optimal Zarude for the Rillasaur deck would be the one from Chilling Reign. But right now, I think the one from Surging Sparks is better more in a stage 1 style.
Yeah, it's tough for me to look at the Chilling Reign Zarude and cut it from a deck, because for me, grass decks are all about setup, right? And so Pat Call, the first attack on the Zarude that has seen play consistently, is, search your deck for a grass Pokemon and put it into your hand. But it's really busted if you go second because you get to get 3 Pokemon instead of 1. So Pat Call has always felt really important to me. It's why I think Kricketune and the Kricketot have stayed in grass decks for as long as they have too, because they're busted starters to have. So taking away that element feels to me like you're taking a little consistency piece out. And, obviously I think the best way to have fun in Gym Leader Challenge is to have decks that consistently do the thing. But I want to see this Jungle Whip do really well. It's a really cool card. Energy conservation is huge, especially when you're trading, one-hit KOs back and forth between opponents. When you're playing those 2 stage 1s that you mentioned, Cherim and Eldegoss, sometimes getting energy back to your hand so that you can attach them to something else is more important, because it's easier to just have the energy in hand than it is to find a recovery card, right? So I see this Zarude making some waves. 120 is just not 132, Josh. I just don't know. 130 is such a different number than this new Zarude only having 120 HP. Is maybe a little troublesome. I don't know. I'm going to play it. We're going to try it. But
it definitely is. But like you said, it's 130 over 120. But when everything's already knocking out 130, what's the difference? So it can be a little bit. I do like the Pat call. I've been Pat called on before, and it just feels bad whenever you're playing against somebody for going. I get tongue tied saying that. First turn going second, getting 3 Pokemon out there, and you're like, well, I guess I'll lose then, because grass, once it gets set up, it's definitely a hard deck to play against.
Yep. So we'll see. Excited to see where people take this Zarude. I might be brewing it with myself too. You've got me intrigued.
Well, yeah, right. It's definitely fun.
Yeah. Well, a card that has already maybe gotten a little bit of love from some people, and has maybe been a little bit like, I don't know, just divisive, because it's an interesting card. It's got some interesting attacks. It feels like it needs a build around, but people are excited about this card. And today, I told you I was colorblind, and not that colorblind has anything to do with this, but I do think that being colorblind my entire life has made me not really focus on art and color so much. Today, for the first time ever, someone told me that Wo-Chien was a snail, and I was like, I had never noticed it was a snail before. I just thought it was like a grass pile, but it's a snail. Turns out Wo-Chien is a snail.
I was so disappointed whenever I saw that it was a snail. I was like, man, it's a snail.
Have we ever had a snail Pokemon, though? I mean,
I think Shellos is pretty snaily.
Okay.
Shuckle is like I don't know. I don't know if Shuckle's a snail.
What is Shuckle?
But Shuckle is that it's that Pokemon that looks like a pickleball.
Oh, okay.
And it has that long yellow neck.
Right? It's the one that has berries in
it. It probably has some berries, but it has that long yellow neck and a little face, and then it has little yellow feet, which is why I was about to say it's not a snail.
I thought it was a turtle.
It kind of is a turtle. I don't know what it is, but it definitely has it looks like a little pickleball to me.
Someone in chat is telling us Slugma too. We missed Slugma.
Slugma's a snail. Macargo's a snail. Yeah.
All right, we got snails. Okay. We've proven snails exist. But anyway, I think it's kind of a cool design. I know you said you were disappointed it's a snail. I mean, I kind of like it's a grass snail. But Wo-Chien has some interesting attacks. I'm going to start with its base stats. So Wo-Chien is a basic with 130 HP, 3 retreat, and then it has 2 attacks. And the second attack is the one I'm going to start with here, Entangling Whip. So for 2 grass and a colorless, it does 130, which is a number that we've seen kind of get printed on a lot of basics recently. Raging Bolt has 3 energy, 130 as its second attack. Thinking about Koraidon just because Dragon's in my mind, 3 energy, 130. So pretty common attack here. But you do have to discard the top 3 cards of your deck. Well, hey, that's not that big of a deal if you're playing recovering cards, and it might actually play into the game plan of what this first attack is trying to do. And aptly named Hazardous Greed, right? Because I feel like this attack is kind of greedy here. But for a grass and a colorless, you get to do 20 to the active. Then, if by some chance you have 3 or fewer cards left in your deck, it does 120 to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So for 2 energy, you could potentially be putting 260 damage onto the board.
Mm-hmm.
Josh,
That's really good.
What are you thinking about Wo-Chien?
I think 260 damage for a basic and GLC is incredible. But can it be done? Can it be done every game? Can you get down to 3 cards safely and feel good about it and have the energy left to get this Wo-Chien going? I think it's definitely a fun card to look at. I looked at it for the first time myself. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Saw the 3 or fewer, and I was like, nope, I do not dare venture into that valley. I don't want to think about running like recovery cards, and I don't want to think about getting down to that. And then a bench barrier comes out, and then what then? You know, you're like, oh man, well, I got down to 3 or fewer, you know. But it's definitely a card for sure. And it's definitely one of, speaking of meme or dream, I definitely think it's a meme deck. But it's totally possible. I just think that it might happen 1 out of 100 games, maybe. I'm not sure. I haven't done the statistics yet on it. Well, what do you think of it?
I think it's kind of a meme too, and I don't want to be too negative about this card. I've been negative about cards in the past and been wrong, so obviously I need to point to those. Chat, call me out. Point to those instances in the past when I've been wrong. I'd love to hear them because I'm man enough to accept when I've been wrong. So I'm hoping I'm wrong on Wo-Chien because, as you guys know, I love some spread. And I love some grass spread, even though it's the most frustrating deck I've probably ever attempted to pilot. And so where do I see this Wo-Chien deck? I have played some really annoying grass decks in the past that have kind of just like chipped away at your opponent and like stalled. And so like the 2 cards that I have on screen are the Celebi, the ancient trait Celebi for the XY promo, that does a damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon for 1 energy. And then if it's knocked out, the Leap Through Time ability says flip a coin. And if it's heads, you deny your opponent a prize and you shuffle Celebi and all cards attached back into your deck. And then Hisuian Lilligant is another card I've really enjoyed to help stall for time. Twister Lutz is double colorless. You do 20 spread damage, and then you get to switch. So you can switch into like Lily's Pokédoll or Robo Substitute to just like kind of chip away and stall and chip away and stall. So does Wo-Chien maybe have a place in a deck like that so that you have time to kind of manipulate your deck and then have a big closing finish? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I could see it working. I could see it happening. I look forward to kind of trying to do this. It just feels kind of like what you said, it's like a lot to do, right? Like as I'm like digging through my deck, which is something you probably want to do anyway. You know, as you're digging through your deck to find the cards that you need to, are you discarding too many to keep drawing to get down to 3? You know, what does the deck look like that's trying to do this? Are you trying to Wo-Chien, or are you just kind of hoping it happens? And if you're just kind of hoping it happens, is it worth a spot in your deck? These are just like things to kind of think about, you know? It's a strong card. You know, putting 260 damage onto the board is really, really strong. You know what else just puts 230 damage on the board? Wailord. You know what puts 300 damage on the board? Torterra. Like, could you just be building a board and doing 300 damage with Torterra? Maybe, like, you know, but if Wo-Chien's your thing, try it out. I want to see it. I compared it to Kyurem, the Dragon Kyurem that we got recently. Like, you know, it costs 5 energy to do 110 damage to 3 things, which is really cool, right? But you can sometimes have that 1 energy cost to do 330 damage to the board. That's kind of cool, too. So, like, you know, I think it's kind of maybe on that same power level that Kyurem is. Yeah, I don't know. I'm so mixed about this card. I don't know how to feel about it because it could be busted, and the cost just seems too steep.
Yeah, I do think that Wo-Chien is grass Kyurem. I do think that I can get on board with that, with how hard it is to get to that point. And it's not like you can recur the Wo-Chien like you can do the Kyurem. You know, most of the time you might be able to get the Kyurem recurred another time, but Wo-Chien you already got 3 cards or fewer in your deck. So you're relying on that last play to be able to get that win, you know. And if you want to play it, play it. But is it competitive? Do you want to be competitive with it? Is like the difference on some of these cards. You know, you can have fun with it, or you can and you can also have fun and win. So there's kind of like there's fine lines between competitive and fun and competitive fun. Does that make sense?
Yep. I get you. Now, that being said, you know, obviously today there was a little bit of discussion about this in the Cardboard Warriors Discord, and, you know, 2 of kind of the hottest cooks out there right now, Zach Z-Man Cuddles, says he's got a Wo-Chien version that he thinks is the best grass deck. And I told him, hey, have you not heard of my Meganium deck? So that we might have to have a battle soon to determine what the best grass deck is. But then also Dead Maniac, if you guys know the architect behind Light Metal and a couple of other lists that have kind of like, there's an Electros list that he has made, which is super sweet. He's also got his version of Wo-Chien. So there are versions of this deck out there. There are proven cooks saying that it's good and it can happen. You know, check them out, check out their list, or, you know, build your own.
Yep, definitely.
All right, back to stuff I love to do. Snipe and spread. That's all I want to be doing in Gym Leader Challenge. And Fire got its own Kyogre. Kind of.
Kind of.
It takes the same number of cards, Josh, when you think about it. You know, Kyogre is a basic, and it needs 4 energy. That's 5 cards right there. Well, Armarouge is a stage 1, and its attack costs 3. So again, 5 cards. All you need is 5 cards between the 2 of them. But this Armarouge that came out is really interesting. And so I actually want to start with the Shark Cadet, because I think that this might be your new optimal Shark Cadet if you're playing this Armarouge. And it's also got a pretty sweet Cosmo foil, so order your Cosmo foils of the Shark Cadet now. I ordered like 3 the other day, just because I think the border is so pretty. But the Shark Cadet has a Fiery Fighting Spirit, which is basically wave summoning. You know, wave summoning for Kyogre searches your deck for water energy and attaches it to Kyogre. Well, Fiery Fighting Spirit does the same thing. Search up a fire energy and attach it to Shark Cadet. Now, the Armarouge that I'm really excited about, first attack, nothing special, just 2 colorless energy and it does 50. But Crimson Blaster, its second attack, is 2 fire and a colorless. It says discard all fire energy from this Pokemon and do 180 to 1 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. And so that's where the Kyogre comparisons stop. Because Kyogre can go anywhere, active or bench. Armarouge is just bench.
Yeah, and that's definitely a negative.
Is it good enough, Josh?
I think it's definitely a good card for Fire. Fire needs some, you know, fun stuff. It's already spicy enough with how much heat it brings, but it can also use this Armarouge. Fire's getting a lot, and we're going to get into that. But Fire's this Armarouge, especially if you have Gust, like a boss or a Guzma or an Escape Rope, and you can kind of get them stuck in the active, you can hit their bench. Much like Kyogre, where you're kind of just sniping active or bench, you have the option, which makes Kyogre definitely the better option. But those are 2 different types. These are just similarities. So I think Armarouge is definitely good. And speaking on the Charcadet, I do love this Charcadet a lot, and especially being able to get that fire energy out for 1. And it does have 80 HP, but sometimes you do want that 1 retreat. So you might think about whichever one that you want to play. I've played 2 retreat basics, like I think the Vivid Voltage Beldum has Call for Family. So sometimes you just think about what's on the card and what is your play style when going into it. And I know Jeff really loves this Charcadet. It's his baby. And he's definitely going to play this in his fire deck.
100%. But I mean, like, wave summoning is probably my most used attack in water. Like, when I'm playing my water list, like, I basically just, like, wave summoning 2 times while I'm trying to set up, and then have another energy attachment during those 2 turns to be able to dynamic wave. Like, my first dynamic wave is typically just me wave summoning, like, whittling the energy onto my Kyogre to be able to snipe my opponent's bench Pokemon.
Yeah.
So,
and that's definitely a good point. Yeah, that's definitely a good point in being able to just self-sufficiently set up energy. You attach, you use the fiery fighting spirits. You got 2, and then the next turn, whenever you evolve it into Armarouge and you have your energy attachment, definitely you're hitting 180 damage to something on the bench. That's taking out plenty of, high-end basics, probably all basics, I'm pretty sure, even with damage reduction. I'm pretty sure can, be knocked out by that Crimson Blaster. So that's definitely good for fire. I think Armarouge is definitely a card that we're going to see in fire, especially some successful ones.
Yeah, I think so too. And you mentioned the Armarouge, the Sharkadet powering itself up for the Armarouge, like that's on turn 2. So like that's the reason why I'm high on the Sharkadet is you get Armarouge on turn 2. But obviously the 70 HP is Buddy Poffinable +1 retreat. Like there's a lot of upsides to playing that too. So think about your basics and what fits your playstyle. But I didn't really want to give a full slide to the other whatever the split off evolution here.
Yeah, I was about to say poor Ceruledge.
Yeah, so Ceruledge is like good. Like don't get me wrong. Like the problem with fire has always been that there's so many good stage 1 attackers. But there's haven't been a lot of strong basic attackers. I think that might start changing a bit. And so like, Ceruledge's stats are kind of like good, but like kind of just like what fire has already had to choose from. Now, the first attack on the Ceruledge is Cursed Edge. Discard all special energy from all of your opponent's Pokemon, which is really cool. But it doesn't hit Snorlax, because that's an effective attack. But it's at a point in the game where like if your opponent has multiple special energies attached on multiple Pokemon, like maybe you're not going to be using Cursed Edge anyway. Like you're probably going to try to force like a prize trade. But I don't know. So like, is the first attack useful? It could be. And so
it could be.
Yeah, and then the second attack here, Black Blaze Slash, excuse me, is 160. Excuse me again. Fire, colorless. It does 160, but then you can't attack. This specific Pokemon can't attack during the next turn. So, like, decent, right? Decent's all I got to say.
Yeah, definitely decent. And I know that you've played a Dark Dex with 2 Weezings, You might play if something with special energy, and most of the time it's going to be colorless, is going rampant. You might tech in Ceruledge as a tech card, and just let them get all their energy out, and then just get rid of all the energy that they put out. But that's probably not as likely, but definitely something that you might keep in mind.
Yeah. And since Armarouge maybe like only hits the bench, maybe having like a backup plan, right? Like the Ceruledge, like being able to just like hit your active for 160 might be worth it. There's a couple of other Pokemon where they only evolve from 1 basic that I've considered playing 2 of as well. Pikachu evolves into Raichu and Alolan Raichu. There's a couple of good printings of Raichu, but also the Alolan Raichu is like one of my favorite cards in all of Gym Leader Challenge. You got the double Weezings that we talked about, Galarian and regular Weezing. And then a card that I've always tried to work is you got your 1 Wurmple, but you got a pretty good Grass Beautifly, and then you have a pretty good Dustox that can take an extra prize. Yeah. But they have different stage 1s, so you can't just play the different stage 2s. So the only way to really make that idea work is like scoop up Net Meganium, because then you can just play the basic and evolve into the stage 2s. I've thought about that so much, but it's just too much to make happen.
That could be fun, definitely. That sounds like somebody would not expect that to happen at all.
Well, moving on to some other great fire cards. This is Gouging Fire, and what people have been naming Banana Hat, because Gouging Fire, I guess, has banana leaves growing out of its head.
It definitely looks like bananas.
Oh, yeah. I guess I'm going to have to get a banana hat if we ever play this on the street. But Gouging Fire is being touted as maybe like the best card that's been printed into Fire in a long time. And I get why people are excited about it. So looking at this card, it's an ancient basic. So there might be, some Seda synergies coming up, and you guys know me, ancients are kind of one of my things. So Gouging Fire's got that going for it. So hopefully if we get another fire ancient that's good, this could see play alongside that. First attack, nothing special. 1 energy, lunge out, does 30 damage. But the second attack is 2 fire and a colorless, and it does 100 damage on its Blazing Charge attack. But if your opponent has 4 or fewer prizes, it just does 70, which, like, you see a lot of conditional cards being, like, specifically, like, even prizes or odd prizes sometimes with some of the Ultra Beasts. And then you see, like, Blacephalon being the specific 3-prize turn. But 4 or fewer is not that, like, bad of a condition. Right, Josh? Do you see Gouging Fire as a really strong, powerful fire attacker?
Yeah, Gouging Fire, like you said, might be one of the best cards for fire to come out of this set. 4 or fewer prizes is extremely easy to get to, especially if your opponent is taking their knockouts. And then for the rest of the game, you're hitting for 170. And nothing can turn that off, you know? So you're able to keep blazing, per se, through your opponent's Pokemon for the remainder of the game if it's undealt with. And then you can play this alongside Entei with its pressure ability, which takes 20 less damage from your opponent's attacks. It's kind of like Intimidate in the VGC. And then Blaze Ball, especially if you're pairing this with Charizard, you're using Entei, you're using Chi-Yu at the beginning, and while you're waiting for Gouging Fire to be able to hit for that 170. So Gouging Fire is a really great card for fire. I think it's going to be just an auto include in most fire decks. Probably not Fire Mill or anything special like that. I think Fire Mill and then Fire are the only 2 decks you really have for fire as a choice. So I think Gouging Fire is an auto include. I think it's really good.
You said that I'm really excited about Fire Snipe going forward, because I think you have the Ninetales that does 90 damage counters. You have the Moltres that can do some damage to the bench. So if we're talking about fire archetypes that might exist, Fire Snipe might be something, especially with the new Armarouge coming out. That's a deck list I'm going to be putting together. I think it's called, like, my mixtape. I think I was in a really dark period of my life, and I decided to call my fire deck my mixtape because of
I forgot about the Torchic. The Torchic was also the Snipe deck as well, wasn't it?
It's been recently included, yes. Torchic plus Blindside is just...
Yeah.
Plus, let's throw Crisis Punch on it and take, like, 2 prizes right at the end. So, yeah, Torchic's a big part of that deck and where I want it to go. But, you know, Gouging Fire is good. It's going to make fire better. I think some of us feel like maybe fire is a type that's really, really struggling. Like, it used to be hanging out with fighting, and then fighting got okie dokie. Is Gouging Fire okie dokie level? And the answer is a resounding no, in my opinion. It just doesn't, like, 2 energy is so much different, even though it's got special energy requirements. It's just so much different than 3 energy, and then the 4 prize condition to hit 170. But 100 early is going to be hitting a lot of things. Like, if you're able to, like, welder 2 energy in the early game, plus throw another energy on it and get attack in with Blazing Charge in the first couple turns, like, that 100 damage is going to take out most things. So, like, it's good early, it's good late. Like, it's just a good, powerful card. And it's going to be sitting there right alongside the Entei that you mentioned, the Chi-Yu with the Mega Fire of Envy attack that can do 140 on Revenge. So, like, these are just really good basic attackers, which is what I felt like Fire has needed for a while. Now, the second that we get a Fire deck that can exist without Charizard, we'll be in a good spot, right? Or, like, if they ever give us Fire Irida, like, right? So that we can, or like a Fire Inteleon, like, that's really... When you look at fire and water, and you're like, what tools does water have to get their stage 2 Excalibur or Blastoise out versus what fire has? You're like, you're missing Irida, you're missing Inteleon, but they would be the same decks without it.
Yeah, and I think if you're worried about the 130 HP, you can just run it alongside Cape of Toughness, Bravery Charm to boost it up to 180. And that works really well with Entei, especially with its ability. And then, I mean, 180 is not a small number. That's one of the harder numbers to hit in GLC. So I think if you played it with that and made it a little bit tanky, where you can kind of tank a hit, not so much tank and heal, but just tank a hit, it can definitely help you go longer.
Oh yeah, take your 2-for-1s. You'll need them in fire.
Yep, 2-for-1s is great.
All right, fire got a Snorlax. Josh, did you hear about this?
Oh, bro, I know. And it's an alligator, bro.
Oh, yeah.
It's a fire gator.
It's basically Snorlax. So, Skeledirge here. Oh, wait. It's a stage 2. Dang. All right. Yeah, Skeledirge, 180 HP, is a stage 2, but it has the Unaware ability. Basically, prevent all effects of attacks used by your opponent's Pokemon done to this Pokemon, which is the exact same ability as Unfazed Fat, which our podcast is named after.
Yep, it definitely is.
On this Fire Stage 2. 30 more HP than Snorlax as a Stage 2. And then you've got your attack Chorcherto, which is just a great name, right? Because, like, Skeledirge is like a singing Pokemon, like the callback, like the orchestra. This is Chorcherto. But for 2 energy, it's going to do 60 plus 20 for each benched Pokemon. So, like, there is a case for hitting big damage if both benches are full. People have been maybe talking about this card. Josh, do you feel like Skeledirge is good enough to play competitively? And then if I'm not playing it competitively and I want to play it casually, where does it fit?
You know, to be honest, I do think Skeledirge has a place in Fire. It's definitely a cheap cost, and if you are playing in a world without Charizard, you're only playing one Stage 2, then, you know, this Stage 2 is the next best thing. It's pretty big with 180 HP, has an awesome ability, Unaware, that's just like Unfazed Fat. And then Torcherto is basically Palkia V-Star. Palkia V has the same attack, where you're hitting for that 60 plus 20 per Pokemon out in the field. And I really do like those type of attacks. I play in Standard, I played Raikou V, which has the same kind of attack. I played Entei V, which had the same kind of attack. And I'm just a big fan of that cheap per bench type of attack. And I think Skeledirge is definitely a card that can, you know, tank a hit, get a 2-for-1, if not a 3-for-1, especially if you're playing against something that is using its abilities or effective attacks to mess with you. Not abilities, but effective attacks to mess with you. So it's definitely not going to be something for Lost Zone. It's going to be something for Lost Zone to worry about, you know. There's not a whole lot that it can deal with. Unless because Snorlax has 150 HP, but Skeledirge has 180 HP. So that's another reach that you have to do. So I think Skeledirge is definitely a fire Pokemon that Fire needs and will also kind of make it go the distance.
Yeah. And, you know, when I looked at Skeledirge, my first thought was kind of to another card. I thought about the Rhyperior that came out in one of the previous sets. I kind of looked at that Rhyperior. It was like a big tanky 200 HP. You know, it had a really good ability that basically protected the bench. And then for 3 energy, it did like 180 damage. And I kind of looked at that card and I was like, that card's like, you know, maybe not up to snuff. And then one of our locals brought it and just ended up like going the 3-0, taking the dub that night with his Rhyperior deck. You know, he got Archeops on the bench as an option and was just like punching people in the face with his Rhyperior all night. And I was like, maybe I need to reevaluate my life. And so when I saw the Skeledirge, I was kind of like that. Like, I needed to approach this from a different mindset, you know? Stage 2s are tough, especially in Fire. You know, 60 base damage is not great. If your opponent's not benching things, you know, can you do enough on your side? And I think Fire can, right? Like, Fire usually wants a big bench. If you're playing, like, Salazzle and Macargo, and then a couple of other attackers on your bench, you know, it makes sense to put the Skeledirge in. So I'm excited to see what people do with it. You know, low-costed Fire feels like a thing. You've got the Moltres that, like, if it has a damage counter, can do more damage as an early donk option. Like, there are definitely things that fit into this. And then if you're not playing Charizard, like, you have room for special energy all of a sudden. So, like, maybe there's, like, a Capture Energy Evo TM play that you can all of a sudden do because you can play Guzma Hala in a Fire deck, which, again, you haven't been able to do because you've been playing all those basics because of Charizard. So, stepping away from Charizard feels like a cool idea. I hope it works out.
Yep. The only thing about not playing in a Charizard world would be it makes Entei a little worse.
Yeah, Entei gets worse. Gouging Fire gets worse. Chi-Yu stays about the same. So you might have to, you know, forget some of those cards, or maybe just hope that you draw Welder or Blacksmith, right? Like, one of the great things about Fire, one of the reasons why Fire can kind of get through ability lock decks the way that it can, is because, you know, hey, you can function without Charizard to a degree if you draw a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Another fire card that is interesting, and I see a lot of people getting hyped on this card. It's Castform and it's Sunny Form. So to give you guys a little bit of backstory, people have been playing this other Castform, the Sunny Form version, that has an ability weather reading that has never ever once come into effect, I don't think. But it's got a reasonable attack plus free retreat. So for 3 energy, it does 150, and you discard a stadium in play. If you can't discard the stadium, it does nothing. So it's kind of like Field Blower plus big damage plus free retreat, which has been kind of nice. Now, new Castform has easier attack cost, but its attacks are definitely worse. But people are kind of looking at it for its utility, and so it's got 2 attacks plus the free retreat. The first one is Singe, 1 fire. Active Pokemon is Burn. I know people are trying to make Burn happen, and that's definitely something that people are excited about in Gym Leader Challenge, making a Burn status condition deck. And then the second attack is Sunny Assist, 50 damage, plus you move all energy to your bench Pokemon. So you get to chip in and then kind of conserve some energy.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about this Castform?
I think these 2 Castforms are very interchangeable depending on your play style. Especially if you play Charizard, I think the high pressure blast is an easy attack to get off. Just with 2 energy attached, it's 150. Both have free retreat, but like maybe you are trying to play a little differently and you want to be a little bit more utilitarian with it. Sunny Assist with a Charizard if you play Charizard. For 1 energy hits for 50, and you can move that to the bench. Singe burns your opponent with the potential of that burn staying on for a little bit, just to kind of give your opponent just soften up your opponent's active quite a bit. So they're definitely 2 very different but very the same cards. Like they both have free retreat. They're both 70 HP and searchable by Buddy Poffin and all sorts of different things like Level Ball. But it just depends on your play style and what type of fire deck are you playing.
Yep.
Like this would be great for Castform, Sunny Form would be great for probably more of a mill deck than the high pressure blast one.
Yep, I agree with you there. And then on top of that, obviously the free retreats is so important because like you got Magma Basin in your deck, right? Magma Basin's basically a Dynamotor, so like having ways to kind of pivot in and out is really important to a lot of fire decks. That's one of the reasons why I think that Castform has seen play the way it has. So again, having another option, always good. Excited to see what fire players do with this and see where it goes from there.
And also the illustration rare for that Castform is insane.
Ooh, I don't think I've seen it yet. I probably should have included it. I like this art though. I kind of like the cartoony art.
Yeah, I love it too. I love it too. The illustration rare is also in kind of that style, but it's just like everything. I love it. It's so nice.
All right, you're hearing it from Josh. Go check out the illustration art. All right, moving on to your baby, Josh. Got some water, and we got to start out with this called. Is it Walrein? Walrein?
I say Walrein.
All right, Walrein. Walrein it is. This Walrein is pretty cool. So stage 2 here, 170 HP. And there's, thinking about it, there's the Palpitoad or the Seismitoad that feels kind of similar to this card to me. Like another stage 2 has similar HP and similar energy cost while being like a good attacker while also being disruptive. And so that's kind of what I like about this Walrein here. So, Walrein has an attack, Frigid Fangs, that's 1 energy, and it basically says, during your opponent's next turn, Pokemon that have 2 or less energy attached can't attack. That's pretty good and pretty interesting. It's an effective attack, which I have found to be the most annoying thing to deal with. I think of the Bell of Silence Chimecho as like a prime example. You can't escape rope out of an effective attack, right? You have to basically Pokemon Ranger it or you're cooked. But besides Frigid Fangs, which is a really good first attack for just 1 energy, you also have Megaton Fall as its second attack for just 1 additional energy. So 2 watered energy in total. It's doing 170. It does do 50 damage to itself. So it just seems pretty good, especially in a low-costed energy deck. Josh, is that where you see it fitting in?
Yeah, definitely in like I like the term lo-fi. So I definitely can see this in like a lo-fi deck. Maybe like instead of frogs and toads, you got like frogs and walruses, But with Frigid Fangs, you're with that 2 or less energy cost, you got all sorts of different ways to get rid of energy. Team Flare Grunt, you got Plumeria, you got Enhanced Hammer, like we talked about in our tech cards. We got Crushing Hammer, all sorts of different ways to get rid of energy from your opponent and kind of control your opponent with this. And I kind of see it more of a control-y style deck that Water could do with the Walrein. But if needed, you can't really affect the Snorlax with Unfazed Fat. So you might just knock it out with Megaton Fall for just 2 energy. It does do 50 damage to itself, but I imagine that you're also playing Malo and Lana and maybe some Rough Seas, that 50 damage isn't going to be too much, So Walrein, I can see being in some decks. I may not play it myself because it's not necessarily my style, but it's definitely a cool water card that Water has to play with, especially with any of the Seismitoad as well. So you could play it with Seismitoad and just have a 3 stage 2 deck as well. So it all depends on what your play style is, and it can have some fun with it.
Yeah, I kind of like when I looked at this card, like Energy Denial is where my brain went, which is why I've included the cards on the slide here. But, Frigid Fangs is a really good attack. 60 damage isn't anything to scoff at for 1 energy. And I was thinking, how could you make this better? What if, while you're denying your opponent energy, you're also just, chipping away for 60, but you're also maybe, chipping away in different ways. There's the Frozlass that, ticks up damage counter on things that have abilities. And then there's a Greninja where if you, discard an energy, you can, put damage counters places. And there's the Quick Shooting Inteleon as, another way. What if your Walrein is in the active, you're making your opponent discard, you're doing 60 to the active, and then you're just putting damage counters on the board as you go, kind of softening up these other Pokemon while you're Frigid Fangings. It sounds like a lot to be set up, but I've seen some of these decks that are trying to do that same thing, but they're using Paralyze as their way to do it. So this might just be another way to play that same type of deck.
Yeah, and just kind of have fun with it. I think that you can play them with those guys and it sees some success. That might be the way to play it. Actually, it's really cool.
Yeah, we'll have to try it out. Again, I'm trying to think about whose deck list it was that I saw, but the name is slipping my head at the moment. Moving on to kind of we talk all the time on this podcast about role compression and about how important it is to have good abilities while simultaneously having strong attackers. And so when I looked at this card, I just saw a worse Octillery because it's a stage 2. And then the more I thought about this card, the more I was like, is it a worse Octillery? And so, Josh, you're going to have to decide for us what you think about it. So we've got Quaquaval, which is what I'm going to say for it. Again, I have no idea what these names actually are. But up-tempo is its ability. And you have to put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck to use the ability. But you get to draw up to 5. And so that ability is actually better than Octillery's because you do get to store a card and then draw up to 5. So it's kind of like emptying your hand for you to a certain degree, which I really like. It is a stage 2. And then on top of that, you get Hydro Splash, which is 2 energy, a water and a colorless, and you get to do 120. And 120 has been fine in these water decks as a damage output. Inteleon does 120 to the active and then puts 20 somewhere else. So you've seen Inteleon's role compression be really good as a support mon and an attacker. Is Quaquaval up there at all, Josh?
You say that, and I've also had those same thoughts. And the more I thought about it, Quaquaval has a lot of good things going for it. But does it have it good enough to involve it as another stage 2 in the water deck? Because again, just like grass, water is very greedy on its bench space. There's already a lot of Pokemon that it wants. And Octillery being so quick and searchable by level ball and being able to get it up by turn 2 without having to use rare candy while also not sacrificing too much space, Octillery might definitely be the better option. But Quaquaval is definitely better, stronger, has 170 HP, 120, doesn't do just like Inteleon, the 20 damage to the bench. So it does have some, utility with how it can attack. And then up tempo is better than Abyssal Hand. But is it better enough to warrant, putting it into your deck? And we're all about having, what is it? Consistency, redundancy. So we got redundancy with it if you were to play both of them. But I do not think it's worth playing both of them enough. You already have a lot of searching tools in your deck, such as Inteleon and Drizzile. And anyways, I just don't think there's enough space. And I think Octillery is just definitely better than Quaquaval.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, we mentioned consistency. A stage 1 is less susceptible to prizing. So just like that fact alone, I don't think that any of the pre-evolutions for Quaquaval actually have like decent abilities either. So like you're not really looking at like something to do while you're getting to the Quaquaval. Like, when you look at Gallade and Kirlia, you see like 2 good abilities there between that evolution line. And I just don't think Quaquaval has that same status. I could see Quaquaval, because again, I'm probably going to try playing it at some point, fitting into like a lo-fi water build, where you do, like, you're running just Inteleon and Quaquaval. You're probably not running, like, a Baxcalibur or another Stage 2 attacker. Like, that's probably it between your Stage 2s. And, I've been wrong about Stage 2 support Pokemon before, too, because when you look at, what Weeder was able to do with Leviathan, and you think Octillery is to go to draw Pokemon in these water lists, and he's up here playing Swampert because he doesn't want to necessarily draw to 5 every turn. He wants to have hands that are 7 or 8, so discarding to draw 3 was something that he wanted to do, and you can see Swampert working in those lists. Like, maybe a Stage 2 draw Pokemon is definitely attainable and doable. So, again, don't diss on the Quaquaval too much. I know I'm thinking, like, it's just maybe not good enough. Octillery exists. Octillery also has a different weakness, and we know how important it is to have a pretty good weakness spread across your Pokemon, especially in a singleton format that has only one type of Pokemon on the list. With water, you get, ice weakness, you get lightning weakness, and with Octillery you get grass weakness, so you can kind of like, fiddle with that to a certain degree. Quaquaval would just throw another lightning weakness into the deck, just things to kind of think about as you're debating Quaquaval in your list. I'm with you, Josh. It's just not there quite yet.
Yeah. Maybe in the future, but not right now.
We just got to get a better, I guess, Quaxwell is the pre-evolution. As soon as you get a Quaxwell with a decent ability, the Quaquaval becomes like instantly more playable. So like this is just a card to kind of like, pin maybe for the future.
Definitely. Keep it in your GLC box.
Well, moving on to a card that I know that you are excited about, and we've talked about this card before, like even before we got to this set review. This is a Titan, and you're a huge fan. You mentioned that Wales is going to be the deck that you're going to be playing in tomorrow's Fall Brawl, and you're playing this Titan that everyone's playing now that has the Special Horn attack. It does 80 plus 140 more if you have a Special Energy attack. Well, you mentioned it earlier too, as we talked about this, about potential matchups into the meta, and you talked about Mimikyu being kind of bad for that, because if you just put counter energy on Mimikyu, you're 220ing back to the Titan for the KO for less energy investment. Well, newest Titan doesn't have that problem. 180 HP is still the game, 3 retreat cost, but it's got the solid body ability, allowing it to take 30 less damage. And then its attack, while it does cost 1 extra energy, isn't dependent on special energy. And then on top of that, it only does 150. So, Josh, how do you feel about New Titan? What are the pluses of playing it over Special Horns Titan?
I 100% am going to test this, and I want to test it, quite a bit. I would like to play it this weekend, but I'm not going to be able to. But it's definitely a great card to be able to. It's tankier, 100% built-in tankiness, which I love. The Dangerous Mouth for 150 is awesome whenever you're talking about copycat attackers, because it's not doing 150. If your solid body is working, then you're only taking 120, and then one Malo and Lana later, you've got 0 damage on you. So I think it's definitely like, how do you want to play? Do you want to play a little bit with less special energy, or do you want to play with this Titan? I'm definitely going to play with this Titan. And I've already been thinking about how I can change up the deck a little bit, because probably aren't going to play as much special energy, and you might not play. I think Guzman Hala is better than Chorus's Tenacity, but you might not play Chorus's Tenacity, so it kind of opens up a little bit more room in your decks, in your water tank and heal deck. So I'm very excited. I've waited to work on it because I haven't messed around with it at all. I've just been kind of like here and there. I'm like, okay, I could probably do with this less special energy in this one. So, but I'm super excited to be able to play this. Unfortunately, we can't play it this weekend because it's not legal yet. But I think this card is going to see a lot of play, and it's just going to be so fun to just hit for 150 and not have to worry about getting copycatted, man. But especially, and you don't know which Zoroark they're going to play in their dark deck. Man, when I'm playing a dark deck, I am sweating. I'm like, please don't have that copycat attack. Please don't have it.
Yeah, I always play foul play now because I think that the meta calls for it, right? Like you play your copycat attacker when you think the meta is it's needed for, right? When people are attacking with great attacks. Mimikyu has been great for so long. Raikou has existed. Guzzlord has existed. Now, for just one special energy attachment to Mimikyu, you get to take care of, a Wailord or this Titan with a special horn attack. So playing this Noosa Titan does solve a weakness that the Whales deck has had. I think it's really good. I'm glad that you brought it to my attention because it wasn't even on my radar until you said something, and I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. It's one of the reasons why in like every single water list that I play the other Wailord, the one that does damage per water energy. Just the Psychic is so prevalent, and this Mimikyu is just a terror. So, maybe now it's time to switch back to the jumbo-sized Wailord. Maybe in your tank and heal deck. I know that you're just playing Frostmoth, but maybe now it's time for, like, Excalibur Kyogre. Like, could that fit into these lists now that you're running more just straight water energies? Could you function with Wailord in your deck with just maybe Recycle and Weakness Guard, or maybe one of the reversals or something like that? I don't know. And these are things that are going to be your problem to solve, Josh, as you make us a deck list to talk about, as you win the Fall Brawl tomorrow. And then we can talk about your list next week.
Talk about a dream, man. Talk about a dream.
I mean, that would be easy scheduling for me. I've already got you every week. We could just, hey, let's talk to the winner of last week's thing. See? Like, it's an episode that writes itself. All right. On to my baby. Fighting, which I haven't been playing a lot recently. But I need to get back in the kitchen and cook because there's some good fighting cards coming up. And, of course, Josh, you're on, so we got to start with some tank and heal. I mentioned that Rhyperior earlier on. I've got it up on screen. Wide Wall is its ability. It's a tanky mon. Garganackle with the Energizing Rock Saw ability is a mon that I've really loved recently. And then Fighting has its own, pot helmet, right? It's got rock chest plate, so you effectively have another one of those cards. And so when this card came out, like that's where my mind went. Let's get this Donphan. So Donphan, there's a couple of good printings of Donphan in Gym Leader Challenge. And this Donphan's got 2 attacks, 150 HP, 4 retreat, which means it is heavy ball searchable. So the first attack is knock flat. It's just 1 energy, and it does 40 damage, and it's not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. The second attack is where we kind of start looking at how interesting this attack is. You've got Guarded Rolling. So for 1 fighting and 2 colorless, it does 120 damage. You do have to discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. And then during your opponent's next turn, it takes 100 less damage. That's a lot. Is it good, Josh?
I can see it working well. I can see it working decently well, especially, and you got the Garganackle up there, which I think accelerates from the discard and heals 30. Am I correct? So you got that and an attachment from hand if you do have it. But also another thing, you could play it with the Colossal, which accelerates a fighting and a fire as well. So I think that Colossal does that. I might have to double check that.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. So you can just put that on there after you've attacked with it as well. So there's all sorts of really cool things that you can do with this Donphan actually to make it near unkillable every turn. With the rock chest plate that takes 30 less damage, now you're taking 130 less damage. So right now you only took what are you taking 100? Now you're they're gonna have to hit a lot. They're gonna have to hit pretty hard. And then if you play Garganackle as opposed to the Colossal, you're healing 30 as well if they did hit you that hard. So it's definitely a card. It's kind of like both a meme card and both a dream card, because there was a deck in standard format not too long ago called Goudra, and every time it used an attack, I forget what the attack name was, but I think you took 100 or 120 less damage every time, and a lot of the time you could get definitely a lot of 2-for-1s. And then also on top of that, if you're able to heal, then that was just stayed in play for several turns, just rendering your opponent just hopeless while they're just staring down this not so big but actually very big Pokemon in front of them. So I think Donphan has some excellent potential that it can play with. It might not. It also can work well with the double colorless as well. So there's all sorts of different ways to get this guy rolling. And then no pun intended, actually, with that rolling joke. But you can play this with DTE too. Who cares about the 20 less damage? You're taking 100 and whatever less damage the next turn. So it's a really cool card. I think it's definitely going to see some play. I've actually thought about doing it as well, just because I do love tank and heal style decks.
Yeah. And this card's really cool for a number of reasons. You mentioned the double colorless energy cost. Obviously, the Colossal, like, it's one of the only Pokemon that actually synergizes with 2 fire energy. So, like, it's not that much of a downside. Most of the other fighting Pokemon in the Colossal list in the past have only had 1 colorless energy cost, and sometimes you draw that double fire energy and you're like, well, what do I do? So it's cool that Donphan has that. Obviously the Rhyperior that we talked about too also has that. And then another thing to note is it says discard 2 energy. It doesn't say energy cards, so I do think that this just works with 1 double colorless. You could just discard that instead of having to discard 2 energy cards. So it's some cool things just to think about if you're trying to include this Donphan into your deck. I can see this card being a menace, but I also just see this card losing so hard to Hex, right? Like, you guarded rolling, right? And then you're taking 100 less damage, and then your opponent's like, okay, I'll take a turn to set up, and then I'll play Hex. So now you can't get extra energy back onto Donphan because your Colossal or your Garganackle have been turned off, and so now you're not going to be taking 100 less damage the following turn because you didn't use that attack, and so now you've effectively lost a turn because of that. So, fighting kind of loses hard to some of these things. Obviously gusting up like a support Pokemon on the turn when it's taking 100 less damage is devastating too. So just things to look about. This is one of the reasons why, like, when I play fighting, I always pair up against someone who's playing Fion, and I'm playing like my Terrakion that's like immune to attacks, and they're just like, well, switch that to the bench, I'll just kill this other thing. And I'm like, that's what I see happening to me when I play this Donphan.
Yeah. Something that you could do to prevent that, I think you might be able to get away with it, since it's so tanky and it's taken like, it probably isn't going to get knocked out by even a Wailord attack some of the time because of the less damage taken. But you could just load it up with energy, just turn after turn, just keep loading it up. That Garganackle is going to heal every time if it has any damage to heal, and you could just get a massive amount of energy on there and not have to worry about the Hex possibly.
Oh yeah, that's definitely something to consider. Like, you're all in on your 2 stage 2s on the bench and this Donphan, and you're just like, don't go down, Donphan. We've seen these kind of wall strategies work with decks like Leviathan and Ursaluna, but when you point to those decks, obviously you're pointing to decks with strong consistency engines, on-board support, and when you look at fighting, you're like, okay, Donphan, you're on your own.
Yeah, you're on your own, kid. But definitely if you play switches to be able to, just in case if they're trying to delay the game, you can just play more switches possibly to make sure that you don't get stuck in the active. But it's they're because they're all 4 retreat costs. That's pretty hefty. They're all heavy boys in there.
Oh yeah. Which is good and bad, right? You get to play heavy ball.
Oh yeah.
All right, a card that is pretty cool. The Fighting's getting some like pretty cool cards. I don't know how they fit in. But there's some pretty cool like designs, and I really like this Grapploct. And so Fighting decks recently have been putting the ancient Great Tusk in there, sometimes alongside the BRS Lucario that can like search up energy and damage itself. So the Great
Mhm.
Tusk says it does 80 plus 80 more damage if one of your bench Pokemon has damage counters on it. And so a couple of different ways, I mentioned that Lucario just now, and then Rainbow Energy are a couple different ways to kind of like guarantee that this Great Tusk is hitting 160 damage. Well, Grapploct gets printed in Surging Sparks, and it's got 140 HP for stage 1, 3 retreat costs, and it's got a mid first attack. 1 energy, chop does 40. Well, the second attack costs fighting, colorless sometimes, and it's called Raging Tentacles, and it does 130. But if Grapploct has any damage counters on it, you can just pay 1 fighting energy, and that's effectively just Rainbow Energy, right? So
Yeah.
Grapploct feels like it could fit into what fighting's already trying to do and just be a pretty good threat. Right, Josh?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, Rainbow Energy is an awesome card. You see it played in Dark with Spiritomb. You see it played in Dragon with Grandpa. So there's all sorts of cards that Rainbow Energy synergizes with, and Grapploct is just another Pokemon that does. For 130 for 1 is really good. I think that's one. It's exceptional, especially in fighting. Whenever you don't want to have look for all those energies, and all you have to have is 1. And if you play courses Tenacity, Guzman Hala, you have all sorts of ways to search out your Rainbow Energy.
Yep, right. Plus Okidogi, right? You just need the Rainbow Energy for Okidogi, right? So
Yep.
there you go. So yeah, I'm excited to see this evolution. Like it being a stage 1 is really its only downside. But we've seen Revenge Lucario put in work. It does 150 for 1 energy as a stage 1 on a Revenge attack. So I think this Grapploct will fit right in. Obviously, like different conditions need to be met for this Grapploct than they do for the Revenge Lucario. But same basic core concept exists. So I could see it being really successful. You could even maybe potentially like play it in like an Earthquake build, right? We haven't
Yeah.
seen Earthquake builds pop up for a while, at least like super successfully. But there's the other Donphan that can do like 120 for 1 energy and then spreads to your bench. Happen to have this Grapploct there. Well, now you can kind of chain attackers quite easily. 1 energy here, 1 energy here. Things are feeling up for fighting on the lo-fi side of things.
Yeah, and with Great Tusk with the ancient, stamp on there, I'm pretty sure there's another ancient Pokemon that might be coming out at some point. And there he
Segue!
is.
Yeah, we got Koraidon coming. And you guys know me, I wrote the article on it. Ancient Garganacl is like one of my favorite decks to play. Like when the Garganacl actually came out as a Pokemon, I was like, this is just basically like second worst Colossal, and now you have redundancy. And then all of a sudden, like Seda, an ancient Pokemon, came out, and I was so excited. I like threw a deck together, and like I started winning with it, and I was like, oh my god, fighting, it has a different archetype that's not Hitmonbros that can maybe win some matchups. And it still felt like it. To play Sedas, you probably needed a third Pokemon that was pretty good. And there was a Sandy Shocks, and the Sandy Shocks is awful. Like, it's so bad. I can't remember exactly what the stats are, but like it had like a pretty hefty retreat cost for what it was trying to do. It needed to be like 1 energy to attack, and it needed like 4 energy in play to do additional damage. And so it just was so mid. Like everything about it, and like I know people tried it, and I know that some people were like, yeah, 90 damage is enough. It isn't. I just did not agree with that card. So like I wanted it to be good. I was like, we need a third ancient fighting Pokemon to really make this deck shine. And it needed to have like cost that made sense with what like the Garganacl lists were trying to do. So, we had Great Tusk, we had Slitherwing. Well, now we got Koraidon. And this card I think is really good. So 130 HP, 2 retreat costs on a basic. The first attack is the attack we care about. It is Unrelenting Onslaught. So it does 30 damage, but if one of your other Pokemon attacked, and I say Pokemon, but one of your other ancient Pokemon attacked, it does 150 extra damage. So you're looking at 180 damage for 2 energy, potentially, but it has to follow up an additional ancient Pokemon attack. Koraidon does not count Koraidon's attack, so you can't like just Koraidon twice to do 30 and then another 180. you have to use one of these other ones. And then it's got a couple of other like weird rulings, like if you like Slitherwing and then you Ninja Boy into Koraidon, Koraidon is still like technically the same as Slitherwing, so you don't actually get the extra boosted damage. There's like a couple of like pretty interesting rulings that come with Koraidon, but if you like scoop it up and it like you attack with Unrelenting Onslaught and then you scoop it up, are able to charge it up and get it back into the active, you then actually get to do the 180 because the game sees it as a different ancient now. It's weird how some of these rulings work, but trust me on this, I talked to subject. So, this Koraidon, Josh, how are you feeling about it? I know I'm hype on it. How are you feeling about it?
Well, like you heard me leading up to it, I think it's going to be a really good card. I think Koraidon, along with Great Tusk and Slitherwing and Professor Sala's Vitality is, I think, one of the consistency cards or one of the consistency pieces that fighting is needed. It's just in this little bubble of Ancient, for that nice acceleration plus draw 3, and then you can also get it back with Pal Pad. It's just a really good little bubble here with Ancient that Ancient does have, and I love the possibility of being able to recur the Koraidon, especially if it gets knocked out. You can also get it back from your discard pile, and it kind of be the same thing, I believe, and also. You can use double colorless on there, so you can have twin energy, double colorless for both Wrathful Charge and Unrelenting Slot. So there's a lot of synergy behind it, and being able to get things rolling pretty well. With a new Night Stretcher, that allows us to be able to recur basics or just Pokemon from the discard pile onto your into play or into your hand, and then when Professor Sala's Vitality just gets the energy out of your discard. So I think it's going to be really cool. I think it's going to be really good, and you'll definitely see it have some play in fighting.
Oh yeah, I've already got the brew. I think we're not playing it this Thursday, but I'm going to be playing it next Thursday. It's just hard when you start thinking about this list. What does the list look like? Because I do want to play Colossal. I do want to play Garganacl. You've got double colorless energy cost kind of across the board in different places now. So playing that fire energy, you could play more fire energy now, basically. And then you get access to Crispin. So like now you can power up Koraidon with a Crispin. Great Tusk with a Crispin because they have that double colorless attack cost with them. And so, like, all of a sudden you get access to these other energy accelerants that aren't just these stage 2s, and your deck gets more consistent. I'm starting to think that maybe, like, even Mela can fit into these decks, right? Like, Koraidon and Great Tusk having the double colorless energy cost means that attaching 2 fire isn't such a terrible thing. So, like, Mela plus Colossal, like, draws me up some cards, gets me an extra attachment. Like, the list just feels so there's so much redundancy in this list now. The only thing it's missing is any way to find cards to your hand, right? Like that's what it's all about with fighting.
Yeah, Sunday, one of these days.
Well, you guys know, kind of transitioning, I've really loved where Dragon is at in the moment. And we saw Ancient fighting a second ago. I've been really hyped on Ancient Dragon. It feels like Dragon is in a place where, like, it's not just fast call all by itself anymore. There might be ways to branch out. And so Dragon's getting some more printings that I think are going to allow it to branch out even further. And so we've got Dialga here. A pretty sweet card in my opinion. 130 HP on a basic. 130 HP is huge in my opinion because Donphan and Druddigon have had 120 historically, and that has been pretty easy to KO from an opposing perspective. But this Dialga having 130 seems really important. And then you basically just get Mallow or Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking as an attack. So Time Manipulation is 1 colorless energy. Search your deck for 2 cards, put them on top of your deck in any order. Pretty good. Now, for Psychic, Metal, Colorless, you get Buster Tail, which is 160. Unconditional 160 on a basic in Dragon. Josh, seems good, right?
Yeah, it's definitely really good for Dragon. But Dragon is one of those, is the only type that is so unique and the fact that you have such a variety of different energies that you have to play. So like this Dialga right here takes a Psychic, Metal, and Colorless, and you can't really play that easily with the Garchomp, which takes a Fire and a Water, I believe, or something like that.
Fighting
Yeah,
water.
fighting water. So yeah, it's just so hard to play like 8 different energies in your dragon deck. Now you can kind of mitigate some of that with some blend energies, some rainbow energies, the double dragon energy, but it really doesn't go. It's not very conducive when you're playing Dredagon, Garchomp with like, let's say, Ultra Necrozma and Dialga. So there's some upsides and downsides with that energy. But Dialga, I think, is really good, especially maybe paired with Ultra Necrozma. And all you have to do is cancel Ultra Necrozma's ability, and you're able to attack for 170, I believe. And then I think it also has some synergy with Noivern that has that spread, that boom burst spread attack, so you can kind of soften up a little bit as well. But Dialga for 160 unconditional doesn't have to worry about not being able to attack the next turn. I think is really good. You just got to think about the other Pokemon or the other dragons that synergize well with it. I like Haxorus. It discards three cards off the top of your deck, but for me, I prefer Garchomp over Haxorus. And then with Garchomp, you have the middle line, which is, it's not Gabite, is it?
Yep.
It is Gabite, yeah. So Gabite allows you to search for any dragon Pokemon. And that is so pivotal in the dragon deck that with that fighting water cost or whatever, I can't remember all the different ones, but I just know that's not as conducive playing it with Dialga, So you got to make sure that like whatever your play style is with Dragon, I think Dragon is starting to get so many different cards right now that there's all sorts of different ways to go about it. I mean, Kyurem is its own archetype, which the only thing you're trying to do is spread 110 to 3 Pokemon at least 2 to 3 times during your entire game with a few revenge Pokemon on the way. But I think Dialga is definitely a cool card, and time manipulation can really help you kind of get things set up by just putting and stacking things on top of your deck early. Instead of just playing, Sopher Maniac or Mallow, you actually get to play a different supporter as well to get things set up.
Yeah, when I'm evaluating dragon cards, I always think about like, where does it fit in currently? And then like, what core is there for the future? And so like Dialga, you mentioned the energy cost being a psychic and a metal. Well, a core is kind of like blossoming for dragon that includes metal energy. And you talked about a couple of them, Ultra Necrozma, Kyurem, and Haxorus, which are all Pokemon that are seeing play currently in different decks that already have that metal energy requirement. So I'm thinking about Dialga, what's it going to look like in the future? And then on top of that, like the time manipulation attack, it's colorless, right? So like the first attachment gets you something to the top of your deck that's going to get you double dragon energy to refill the rest of the requirement. So like this Dialga is basically with any energy in your deck is setting up 160 potentially on the second turn of the game. So that's kind of what I'm looking at when I see this Dialga. It's going to be like, not only is it set up, but it's going to be aggressive, right? Like all I got to do is grab Colress's Tenacity off the top of my deck to make it be hitting 160 if I can get it into the active on turn 1. So that's kind of what I'm looking at with this Dialga. I think it's good. I don't know what the deck looks like yet, like what the Pokemon are. Is it good enough to just play with the special energies as it is and just slot it into your deck? Maybe. Like Dragon hasn't had a starter like this that's kind of like setup oriented. Like Tatsugiri feels like it's kind of that way. Like you don't necessarily need the energy attachment, but this has, again, we're using that word, role compression, right? It's a setup mon and it's a good attacker. Dialga just feels really, really strong. Just need to crack the build.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Dialga has a lot of potential having that on a basic.
Now, kind of the other direction here, especially when we talk about Dragon, we gotta focus on the energy cost. Is this new Eternatus that's coming out? And it's drawing a lot of comparisons to Snorlax because it's a basic that does huge damage. And of course the attack cost is 3 energy. But this feels kind of steep for what it is. I just don't know where it's going to fit in. And Josh, maybe you can help fill in some of the blanks with how you feel about this card too. But Eternatus basically has the most useless first attack on the planet for what Gym Leader Challenge is. So Dynablast is 1 dark energy. It does 10. And then if the opponent's active Pokemon is an EX, it does 80 more. It's only ever going to do 10 in Gym Leader Challenge. Now, the second attack is exciting, but it comes at a very steep cost. We got we got fire and then double dark for World Ender. World Ender does 230 damage, but you have to discard a stadium and play or else it does nothing. Is Eternatus a dream or the meme, Josh?
Man, I tell you what, Eternatus has some potential. The only one of the thing, and it's just very minuscule because a lot of the time there will be a stadium in play and you're going to be able to, discard that stadium a lot of the time. But it takes 3 energy, 2 of which being a dark and 1 is not, and there's no colorless cost. And that means you have to play more, let's say, like you do have that cost with, you can pay that cost with Double Dragon, but there's probably a better target for your Double Dragon at that time. And when you're using this, a lot of the time you don't want to waste, it is 150 HP, but you don't want to waste a Double Dragon energy hitting for 230, get rid of a stadium, and then not have the, guaranteed stadium the next turn and just, knock out something that isn't 230. So it's cool. It's awesome. I think 230 is awesome, but it doesn't have a whole lot of synergy with a whole lot of dragons, I don't think, besides maybe Noivern, and only because Noivern has that Dragon Pulse attack. And I think it's a Psychic, Dark, and a Colorless. But there you go. You see the Colorless cost, and that makes it a little bit more flexible. But with the double dark, it makes it a little bit less flexible. And with all the different, with that condition of the stadium and then not being guaranteed a stadium again the next turn, you might get 1 good use and then have to scramble and find something later.
Yeah, and Haxorus already exists, right? Like, when we're looking at doing 230 damage, which is a number that's become increasingly more important because your Wailord exists, Josh. Thank you for that, by the way. But, Haxorus has, an attack that does 230, but it has that fighting energy cost, which does, in fact, it synergize well with a lot of the other costs that Dragon has going on. I think Drampa has a fighting cost. Garchomp has a fighting cost.
Yeah.
So like obviously playing the fighting energy is not that big of a deal when you're including Haxorus into the mix. And then Haxorus has a really good first attack too. So there's that. So when you look at Eternatus, you have to be like, okay, is it easier to get a stage 2 out? Which remember, you have Dragon Call off of the Gabite. So is it easier to get a stage 2 out, or is it easier to fulfill this energy cost of Eternatus? And the answer is, I just don't know yet. And, how important is hitting 230 in every single matchup? I also don't know. I really just care about Wailord with that number. So are either of these cards 100% necessary? I know people have talked about Haxorus being great, and they love that card. But again, it just seems like, a one situation where you need to hit that number. Now, I do think this Eternatus home is probably in a Reshiram Turbo Blaze build. For those of you who don't know what Turbo Blaze does, the Reshiram basically has to be in the active, and you can attach a fire energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. So with Reshiram, you can get that fire energy onto Eternatus, and hopefully find special energies to fill out the rest of what Whirlwinder does, and then you're okay with it, and you're probably running a lot more basics in a Reshiram build than you would in other builds, so you're probably not the same like Gabite, Garchomp, Fast Call Dragonite build. So Reshiram's probably your answer if you're going Eternatus, and then if not, it's probably better just to stick with Haxorus for now. But I don't know. Again, you gotta look to the future, right? Where are those dark energy dragons gonna be? Hopefully we're getting some.
Yeah, hopefully we do. I think if they do, Eternatus is that much better. But for now, I think it's just in your GLC box of promising cards.
Yep. I agree with you there. All right, on to metal. Iron Crown is an interesting card. Again, you're more of a metal guru than I am, Josh. So Iron Crown is one of the few metal Pokemon that has a decent attack for 2 energy, which, most of metal mons that I see getting played these days, 3 or more is typically what you see for the energy, which can sometimes be tough if you do not have your ability accelerators up online and going. And so Iron Crown here for 2 energy, 1 metal and a colorless, does the deleting slash attack. 40 base, but if your opponent has 3 or more bench Pokemon, which is fairly common, it does 80 more. The second attack, nothing to write home about. It's Slicing Blade, 1 metal, 2 colorless. It does 100 damage. Now, people have liked 2 energy attacks in some builds. You've seen this Magearna getting played with Wind Up Cannon. Again, same energy cost. It's 1 metal, 1 colorless. It does 10 plus 20 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. It's just got that roll compression we keep mentioning. It can have the overhaul attack, which lets you shuffle, draw 6. It's Cynthia on an attack. Does Iron Crown fit into metal builds and what metal's trying to do, Josh?
The more I thought about it, at the very beginning, I was super excited about Iron Crown, just being a light attacker. But then, like being in a tank and heal list or like a tanky deck, the more I thought about it, the less excited I was, because you kind of want to fulfill those energy costs on your big boys in the middle deck early, and you don't want to necessarily waste it on this deleting slash attack. Although deleting slash is really cool and it forces your opponent to be like, or should I play 3 Pokemon on my bench and risk getting knocked out right now, or should I just put 2 and limit the bench? So there's some decisions to be made whenever you put Iron Crown out. I can see this definitely probably in like a light metal list where the energy costs are down and you're just kind of quick attacking metal and every now and then tanking a hit. But really, I don't see a place for this in a tanky style deck. And just you're probably good with the regular, the non-future Cobalion with the revenge attack that allows you to come back. I'm a big fan of that card, especially sometimes you can get a counter energy on there last bit and be able to hit for 180 pretty well with that card. So I think Iron Crown is cool, just not in a tank and heal list, more of just a light metal list.
Yeah. I mean, I really don't have a lot to add. I'm like such a novice when it comes to metal. Like, I've really liked the Archaladon builds that I've been playing, and I feel at home with those. And then outside of that, it's just like, okay, is deleting slash good? Maybe. So I'm going to leave it up to you, Josh. You tell us what you think. So for now, deleting slash, Iron Crown, keep it to your light metal builds. Besides that, stay with the tanky boys.
Stay with the tankies.
Guard claw your way to the victory. All right, Josh, I don't even know if I should have included this card on here. It just felt like I needed to. Something deep inside me said, put this Kecleon on this slide and we'll talk about it. As you guys know, spread and snipe is my game, and so when I saw this card, it was the most annoying card that I'd seen printed in a while. And so it's 70 HP on a basic with 1 retreat cost. It's got the Expert Hider ability. If damage is done to this Pokemon, flip a coin. If heads, prevent that damage. And then, of course, it's got Lick Whip, which does 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. I just don't know if that really fits into anything, but we've seen some kind of annoying spreaders in the past. The Celebi, which I've already mentioned, which on a coin flip, gets shuffled back into the deck and denies your opponent a prize. Only does 1 damage counter to everything and sees play. And then if you think about Kecleon and like colorless spread, which I think is a real deck, like it might have a place in like an Iron Jugglerist build where you're trying to put damage on different mons that you can put more on later on, that you might need some time kind of getting set up. And what better to deny setup than denying damage and just keep putting 30 here and 30 here. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, Josh, Kecleon, is it a thing?
I mean, it could be if you really want to put it in your spread colorless list. It does have that really that annoying, could be annoying ability where it denies you some prizes, your opponent some prizes. but do you really want to, have this card in your deck?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look at it. It's so cool. I
Oh
love
no,
it.
he's a nice looking guy. No, but Liquid, funniness aside, I mean, for a twin energy or a double colorless, you're doing 30 damage somewhere, and you know that you already play special charge, and you're able to get that double turbo back anyhow. You should be good to go, and it's just like a little lighthearted, like, here is my Kecleon, hit him if you want to, and we're gonna see if you get a prize or not. Yeah. So it's definitely something that could be considered. Definitely something that could be considered, but you might have some better options. You just might.
Oh yeah, you do. You have better options 100%. So I felt compelled to include it. If you're looking for that fun factor, we mentioned flip colorless or flip grass earlier on. Coin flip grass is a deck. Maybe coin flip colorless annoying stuff is a thing. So we'll see. I liked this art. This card is cool. It's a cool, neat design. It's not strong enough. It's not powerful enough. Don't play it. All right, on to the trainers. And we alluded to this at the beginning. This set feels good for GLC, but it doesn't feel warping because the trainers just don't feel up to snuff. And so now we get to talk to you about them and about why we think maybe they're playable, but maybe why they're not super great. And so the first card on the screen is Call Bell. And so you can use this card only if you go second and only during your first turn. The most specific of uses. But you get to search your deck for a supporter card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Does any deck want Call Bell, Josh?
I want to say no, because I really dislike having in your hand on your first turn cards. I'm not the biggest fan of them. But they do have a place like Battle VIP Pass. It sees play. I'm not going to play it myself just because that's not my play style. I like guaranteed. I like security in my life. So I don't want to play Battle VIP Pass or anything that I know is going to be a dead card if I don't get it in my first hand. Call Bell is fun. You could definitely Arven for it, but then you're not able to play a supporter because you Arven for it. Which is kind of funny. But you could guarantee yourself that supporter next turn. But Call Bell is funny. I think Mahone played it on stream, and he got pretty he got some hot hands with the Call Bell on one of his games, and it really does help if you get it. It could probably really just gives you what you want and get you set up. So Call Bell, if you get it your first hand, awesome. I'm not going to play it just because I usually don't get these cards in my first hand.
I think there's one deck that wants Call Bell, and it's one of the strongest decks in the format. I think Psychic Lost Zone wants Call Bell so bad. Your entire strategy is Coerce's Experiment, right? So I think that you probably are okay with the gamble of Call Bell. I think you're okay if you're playing that deck to Arven for Call Bell, because that's all you're trying to do is play Coerce's Experiment as much as you can early and often to get it. So you also play Battle Compressor in that list, which lets you look through your deck, find 3 cards, and put them into your discard pile because you're already playing the Gengar and some other discard synergies. So I see Call Bell going into Psychic Lost Zone decks, and I see it being that just instant win the game button. If you can play Coerce Experiment on turn 1, I don't think I've ever seen a Psychic Lost Zone deck lose.
That would be, yeah. I can get down with that, yeah. Call Bell, Psychic, Lost Zone, definitely something to experiment with, 100%.
Yeah, I'm gonna be playing it. Well, I don't know what
I can agree with you.
All right. Card I'm excited about. Again, all spread, all day. Gravity Mountain is a really, really fun and cool design. I am glad that Creatures or whoever designed these cards came out with this card. So Gravity Mountain, each stage 2 Pokemon in play gets 30 less HP. And if you know, spread decks struggle into bulky evolution Pokemon. I mean, we've been playing Technical Machine Devolution, which I do not think is a very good card, just because we need to lower some HPs. So I think Gravity Mountain is going to be a really important card for some of these decks that already need to find stadiums because you're playing Silent Lab for bench barriers. So I think Gravity Mountain just kind of slides into these decks and goes from there. Josh, you think the same thing?
Actually, yeah, I kind of see the synergy behind Devolution, Gravity Mountain, and stuff like that. That's actually really cool because I was like, but it also depends on what stage 2 Pokemon are out in the format right now. I know that there's a lot of support Pokemon that are stage 2, and we've went over a lot of them. There's a few attackers, but if you can get enough spread out, use Gravity Mountain, you don't have to get as much spread out now, and use Devolution. I can see it definitely, taking some prizes and just, getting rid of devastating your opponent's turns, and then them having to scramble it to get back, or maybe not be able to scramble back at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, Gravity Mountain's pretty cool. In specific spread decks, definitely.
Yeah, it's always tough to think about what stage 2s you're going to see because spread decks do really typically struggle into grass, and grass is seeing a little less play these days. At least it feels that way. I'm not sure if that's actually the facts. We just don't have the data to prove it. But, Gravity Mountain would be really good in that matchup, making, basically effectively putting 30 more damage on the board is what Gravity Mountain would do for those spread decks. So, I think Lightning Spread is a deck that maybe wants to consider Gravity Mountain just because you do it in waves of 50, right? So, this would definitely get you to those stage 2s faster. I don't know if any other spread deck is really going to get to those high numbers. I think they might rely more on something like Technical Machine Devolution, but we'll have to wait and see kind of what the meta looks like as these new cards come in, and so maybe Gravity Mountain's a good call. I don't know. I'm going to be trying it out in a couple lists. We'll see if it's good. It's just so weird to tell with these tech cards, right? Are they going to be good or bad if you don't know what the meta is going to look like in a week or two?
Yeah.
All right. Card I'm excited about, Surfer. It's not overly powerful. It's just pretty good. So Surfer is switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon, and if you do, draw up to 5. Short and simple, Josh.
Yeah, I know that you're a fan of switch cards, and that this may be a good switch card. It's not the most powerful out of the switch draw supporters, but there's definitely a place for it, especially possibly for fighting, because fighting usually needs that extra draw, and a lot of the time in fighting you are playing with a smaller hand. So I can definitely see this most played in probably fighting, but other than that, I think with your options with Bird Keeper, Tate and Liza, I think it might be on the lower list of the priority. Surfer's not a terrible card. It's not a bad card. It's definitely an okay card that has niche spots, such as the fighting build.
And that's where I'm looking at it for, is Surfer Bros, right? You're going to play your Hitmon Bros list, maybe with a little bit of Surfer. I think, those
That's a good name.
Those fighting lists, they really need help, right? So you often need effect plus draw to keep your hands going. So Bird Keeper is your first choice, right? Just straight drawing 3 cards is so important. But then Tate and Liza, you only get one or the other when you really want both. And so I think if you are playing a fighting build, it's always going to be Bird Keeper first. But then I think you're going to consider Surfer over something like Tate and Liza in a Hitmon Bros build. So it's just something to think about going forward. I really like Surfer, but like you said, it feels like a third or fourth option, because we didn't even mention Malon Lana is another switch card, and that effectively feels better than Surfer because it has some other uses with some other cards too. So yeah, something to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, another card. Again, we're mentioning the trainers that might see play. I don't even know if this card will really see play at all, but it felt worth mentioning. Meddling Memo. So your opponent counts the cards in their hands, shuffles those cards, and puts them on the bottom, and then draws the same number of cards. Is Meddling Memo better than the other options that we have available in the format, Josh?
I see what it's trying to do, but no, it's red. It's not better than Red Card. It's not better than Reset Stamp. The only plausible way I can think of is there's a few cards that makes your opponent shuffle draw 4 or something like that. But by then, I was going to be like, you could use Meddling Memo then. But by then, you've already made them reduce their hand size anyways. So with that being said, I don't think Meddling Memo is too playable whatsoever. But I mean, there was slim pickings for trainers for this set. So this is just one of those cards that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So yeah, before you see this card and you're like, hey, hand disruption is an item card that already exists. It's red card and reset stamp. Play those cards instead. And they're cheap.
Yeah, real cheap.
All right. So more trainers that just don't feel quite up to snuff now. I should always point out now, we're still just waiting. Here's Clemont's Quick Wit. Heal 60 damage from each of your lightning Pokemon. Lightning Pokemon just don't tank the way that other types do. Do you think,
no, they don't.
Do you think in the future that there will be a tanky lightning deck that Clemont's will do it? Or do you think we're just going to contend on the trend of fast hitting, low HP Pokemon and lightning?
I think it would be really cool if they made a tanky lightning Pokemon, just like a lightning turtle or like a lightning elephant or something. That'd be really cool. But the reason why I think Clemont's Quick Wit could be decent is we got the Raichu that does 50 to everything if there's damage out, you know. But I was also thinking along the lines of the Emolga that does 10 to everything for free, and possibly that being one of your better starters to use, just a free 10 to everything thing. And then whenever you're just like spreading damage, you probably might do it for 1, 2, 3 turns, you know, depending on how your opponent's drawing. And hopefully you're able to possibly get a Clemont's Quick Wit, heal all your damage on there. And by the time you've got a Raichu build up, maybe you could just use Raichu's 50 to everything, but you've healed all that damage with Clemont. So that's kind of the route that I was going with it. There's a lot of things that kind of lead up to that. But, I mean, it's definitely something that could be possible. Not the best thing, not the most optimal thing, but it's definitely something your opponent's not going to foresee.
I mean, I've definitely cooked myself with that Raichu before, so I see the value in a Clemont's Quick Wit, but it just feels, you know, I feel like we're digging here for good supporters.
We're really digging. Digging. I was digging.
All right, in that same vein, we got Dragon Elixir, and I think Dragon Elixir is like tanky Dragon's like kind of there, right? Like Dragon has beefier basics, high HP stage 2s. It has like a built-in immunity effect with Sonic Slip. So like, you know, you see people run the Acerola, you know, scoop up, keep DDE and Luxurious Cape and move it to a different Pokemon, prize denial, sorts of things. So like Dragon Elixir feels like it could be a really real card. So Dragon Elixir heals 60 damage from your active Dragon Pokemon. And this is on an item. And I want you guys to know that they printed Cook before. And Cook on a supporter healed 70 damage from your active Pokemon. So they basically just made it into an item, but only for dragons. And it still is like, is it playable? Josh, is it playable?
Dude, I think it is. I think it might be. Like, especially if you're playing with Garchomp. And a lot of the time with Garchomp, you're playing Pot Helmet. So you're taking 30 less damage. And depending on what your opponent's attacking with, it's a possibility that you can, you know, mitigate quite a bit of damage to last not only one more turn with your ability, but one extra turn with Pot Helmet and Dragon Elixir. So I think there's a possibility of it being played. Not the biggest, like you said, we're digging, but Dragon Elixir was very cool. 60 damage on an item heal is really good, actually. It's like, I think it's the only card in the game that does 60 damage heal on an item. So I think it was worth mentioning, and somebody might find a spot for it. So I'm excited to see if anybody does.
Yeah, we need to cook with it. Like I see potential here with Dragon Elixir. Cook not so much.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it. That brings us to the end of our Surging Sparks set review. That was a long one, Josh. We've been here for 2 hours and 53 minutes. It hasn't
Man,
felt
I didn't
that
even
long.
expect that. No,
Yeah.
it hadn't.
Yeah.
Golly.
I told you beforehand, make sure you grab some water. I've already had mine. I needed to get another cup, but I was just too busy talking some Pokemon with you. This leads us to kind of our wrap up. So, Surging Sparks, we talked about a lot of different cards. From what you've seen, what do you think is going to be one of the most played cards from the set?
Most played, I think we will see probably Gouging Fire. I think Gouging Fire is going to be a really highly played card along with Tapu Koko. It's hard to figure out which one is going to be like the most played, but Tapu Koko is so good. Gouging Fire is really good, and I think people are really excited to actually be able to play Fire and have a fighting chance at it. So I think Gouging Fire, Tapu Koko is going to be up there with most played.
Yeah, I mean, Gouging Fire seems like a pretty safe pick. I'm kind of eyeing this Dialga. It feels so strong for what it is. The only thing that's holding it back is like what modern Dragon List are doing doesn't necessarily like fit into what Dialga is doing, but I feel like we're gonna figure it out, and I think it's gonna become a staple. And I'm ready to eat these words in a couple weeks when no one's playing Dialga, but I just feel like the card feels really strong. It's just can it fit? So I'm gonna, as a dark horse most played card, I want to see people play Dialga, and if I had to go with a safer pick, I might go with that Smoochum that we saw earlier. And,
Yeah, Smoochum.
Losing Marshadow, I think like hurts Psychic more than I think what we've led on. Psychic is such a powerful type that it can win regardless of that, but it needs to gain something, and I think a more explosive start is what Smoochum gives it. And Shining Mew to a certain degree too, but there's a lot more upside with what Smoochum is trying to do. So I think that Smoochum might be a card that we see most played. It might become a staple in Psychic lists.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with your Dialga, I think as long as you can get a turn in, as long as the things that are needed aren't prized, I think 160 for at least 1 to 2 turns with the double dragon, I think that's enough to help because it does have a colorless cost. So that double dragon will, it doesn't need to synergize too much as long as it has that attached. So if it can set itself up and survive a couple turns, I think 160 and you're able to just recur that 160 is definitely going to be worth just having it in your deck regardless of the energy that you do have in the deck.
Yeah, it's definitely maybe like competing. Like we just got Raging Bolt, right? Like Raging Bolt has been the hotness, right? So like having another good basic come out and like kind of be like competing with separate energy cost. It might have been a bad pick to pick that one, but I'm sticking with the Smoochum one for sure.
Yeah.
All right. That being said, most impactful, obviously different than most played. Like, what card do you think is going to come in and we're just all going to be like, wow?
Possibility. I mean, Togekiss can be pretty impactful, especially if you're flipping heads. Could probably change the game. I don't know. I don't want to talk about bans or anything. But if Togekiss is seeing a lot of extra prizes and people see that, and if it's annoying enough, I think there might be some talk with it. But I'll put Togekiss on that most impactful list, depending on if it is actually impactful. So we got to see what it does. But if it does what it's supposed to, it's going to be extremely impactful for Psychic.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a passive Guzzlord, right? Like, I mean, only 50% of the time, but even that is just pretty annoying. So just imagine Guzzlording for multiple turns, no matter, even if you're KO in the active. It could be rough. I'm hoping it's not. But I could see situations where it snowballs out of control. So I think that's a pretty good bet for most impactful. I think a couple weeks ago, like maybe before the Raikou ban, I would have said that Magneton, right? Like we were all staring at that Magneton being like, wow, that card is like pretty good. It's what Lightning like is going to put Lightning towards the top. Raikou got banned, so obviously it's not going to make as much of an impact. But that Tapu Koko, I mean, I just look at that card and it just feels from top to bottom, like HP, retreat, first attack, second attack. It's just such a solid card and a type that's really been struggling. So if I'm going to say, there's something that's going to turn things around for all of us that love lightning, that Tapu Koko feels really good. So that's my bet for most impactful. Locking it in. Now.
Yeah, I agree with that too as well. That's good. That's a good one.
Yeah. All right. Now, as far as cards in this set, is there anything you think feels a little overhyped? Like you hear people talking about it, and you're just like, I don't know.
I think you and I are going to have the same card for this, possibly, and we're going to say it at the same time.
Oh no,
okay?
I'm not. I can't even think of a card right now. Why don't you say it, and then I'll agree with you.
It's Magneton.
Oh yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. You're supposed to know this. Yeah, Magneton, I think it's going to be overhyped. Well, I think it is overhyped. As much as I hype it up as well in my own mind, it's got to be overhyped. Call Signal is so good already as well. And depending on how you play and your play style, Magneton is either going to be, it's going to flop or it's going to not, Mm-hmm. So I think overhyped is definitely Magneton. Especially now that Raku's out of the mix, maybe it wasn't overhyped before then, but afterwards it definitely is overhyped now.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you to that point, but I've got to continue on my trend of hating on a specific type. And I've got to keep hating fire. And so I don't know if Gouging Fire is the answer that we've all thought about. It's a good card. Don't get me wrong. I said this with Okidogi too. I think Okidogi is a great card. And I thought that maybe just like people were hyping it up too much. It wasn't the end all be all answer. Okidogi has continued to be a really strong card. It's really, really strong. It might have been appropriately hyped. But I'm going to go ahead and say Gouging Fire. It still mostly needs Charizard to be good. It has a 3 energy attack cost, and it needs the condition of 4 prizes. So I think it's a good card. It's a fine card. It's not going to make Fire top tier all of a sudden, but it's definitely going to make the games a lot smoother, a lot better, and you're going to have another good basic attacker. So overhyped card, Gouging Fire. I said it. No, we're done.
We're done. Cut it. Cut the pod.
All right. No one can debate with me. Actually, if you disagree with me, tell me in the YouTube comments below. I've actually got to win a fire badge coming up. I'm getting to the point where I've got fire, fairy, fighting, I think are the last 3. I feel like there's another type I'm missing in there too. But those are kind of my last couple badges. So I'm going to have to eat my words and try to win with fire coming up. I'm dreading it.
He's going to have to put that Gouging Fire in, guys. He's going to have to put it in.
Not in my deck. We're going Typhlosion, baby. I'm playing. My game plan is to play Rainbow Typhlosion. So if you guys have seen, there's a Bohemian list up on. It's called Turbo Fire, Turbo Rainbow Fire, I think is what it is, and it plays the amazing rare Reshiram that has all the weird energy cost. My game plan is to do 270 damage with a Wishful Baton, move that dark and lightning energy onto one of my Pokemon that need fire energy, and then use Typhlosion's ability, which basically like paints all the energy into fire energy, so that now I can use Amazing Rare Reshiram and then Typhlosion it back into fire energy for my next attacker. So that's my game plan. We'll see if it works, but that's where I'm going with fire.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, hey, Josh, dude, thanks again for talking to me about Surging Sparks set review. It's been so fun talking to you tonight, dude.
I know it's been, and we talked a lot, and we didn't even know we were talking so much.
All right, yeah, 3 hours in, such a good time. Well, everyone who listened to us talk for 3 hours, thank you again so much. And if you're watching this very long video or listening to us on Spotify, I appreciate it. Again, this has been Unfazed Facts. I'm Jeff Beisch, and we've been here with Josh too. And this has been Unfazed Facts, the podcast dedicated to all things Gym Leader Challenge and the Pokemon TCG. We'll see you guys all next week. Have a good night.